Nivek, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I think you're good, man. Feel free to start.
Okay. Hold on. Yeah. I just wanted to talk about how God is viewed in where when the question is asked about God with Jordan Peterson, it's and is the, is the God metaphorical God, like you would is it about a metaphor that you'd see in a story that would symbolize a meaning, or is it the literal God, like the religious biblical God, where you're to take the God literally, and or is it really about the self, and where it's about what you are? It's almost as if you think of yourself as a God because the things that you think about are from you. And I was kind of curious, like when there's a discussion about like science and religion, it's like the statements would be made like, well, you can't really use science to understand things. Um, you have things that can't really be explained. That is kind of like with the scientific method, you could get meaning and understanding of things around you, of the environment, and with God, I guess it's compensation for that. If the things around you are beyond your understanding in knowledge and reasoning, I see God as a metaphor for that, and it's not necessarily for God to be taken literal. It's more about it being taken as a metaphor to things that are hard to understand. Um, so I kind of like I wanted to like have a conversation on what or who is not what, but who is Jordan Peterson's God. The thing about like a mythologic thinking about things mythologically, it's used to affect reality, and that could be a dangerous thing because you're taking something that's of a delusion and you're applying it literally. where that could become a misunderstanding. That and that could be taken literal to the extreme where people would kill over. And the thing about art, the metaphor of art, it's a metaphor and it's not to be taken literal. And where, as a result, you can get the meaning of the message more. Oh. Hey Jack, how you doing?
You caught me in the middle of something. I'll be right back.
Oh. Yeah, so I was like wondering if God is necessary.
Talking about okay, so let's get past the Jordan Peterson's God question real quick, at least from my perspective. I think Jordan Peterson has a very classic like Christian New Testament Christian view on God, except that within his worldview or the way that he presents things and the way that he wants to get his message across to people, I believe that he takes away the divinity from it and uses it as a storytelling device that gives us what he's quoted as saying some of the best stories ever that allow us to look in at our innermost psyche and
Absolutely.
shit like that. So I don't think so. I think that he actually like deep within probably believes in a Christian God, but he's removed divinity from the God and is trying to use just the set of stories as a way to tie in morality and the way that we should act and all this other stuff.
Yeah, and I can see good in that. And you have like, okay, you have this story and it's telling you kind of how to live, and you're
Well, I
going
mean,
about that in going along with the story.
well,
And that
stories just like everything else can be good or bad, right? So it's like why is this story any good? Because it's got sacrifice in it. You know what I mean? Harry Potter has sacrifice in it. Is Harry Potter as good as the Bible?
well, it can have everything in it.
Yeah,
And
no, my answer is that Jordan Peterson's God is probably Yahweh, except he's removed divinity from Yahweh and just tried to make him make his story like a literal story that was or not a non-literal story that was made up for people to try and base their morals off of. Yeah.
you know what? I never really looked up his view on Yahweh.
Yeah.
That's not like a literal God, right? It's more of
Well, no,
like
Yahweh is the representative God for the Trinity, or like, or I would, or for the trio of like major religions. Like Yahweh is technically the Jewish God, the Christian God, and the Muslim God.
it's kind of like sounds like it's everything.
For those three religions specifically, yeah, Yahweh is kind of an all-encompassing God term. It doesn't really work for any other religions, but those are the most popular ones anyway. So
Yeah. And it can help with conformity as well. It's kind of like, well,
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
do this.
Yes, carnal. Yahweh is the God of Abraham.
Oh, whoops, didn't see that. Oh, you see that in the text?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's they're not easy to see. Sometimes they don't show up.
Oh, okay. Hold on, I'm looking at the wrong text.
Oh, okay.
This, I guess that was a YouTube text you're looking at.
No, I was looking at the call-in text.
Really?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Sometimes it just doesn't show up under the host though.
really?
Yeah, sometimes it's just a big. Yeah, sometimes it's a pain in the butt. It just doesn't show up because I've had to go to the call-in website to just try and see it, but then it messes up my stream,
Uh,
so I can't really do it.
uh, okay. Hold on. I'm just checking it. Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not working.
No, I was looking at the.
Hold on.
They're keeping it. But yeah, no. So that's who I think Jordan Peterson's God is. I think his God is actually just Yahweh for like the Christian God in the Bible, and he's just tried to remove divinity from it and made the story that he's talking about like of utmost importance, and that story has all of the important things that you need to have in a story to tell you how to be a good person. That's kind of who I think Jordan Peterson's God is.
Um,
But is God necessary? I also don't think that. I don't think God's necessary either.
it's working for you. The text is working for you, huh?
Uh,
You seeing anything else?
Carnal Nature says, I haven't been keeping.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, we'll have a conversation. If anybody says anything like noteworthy, we can talk about it.
I'm on my phone. Yeah, the thing about that is, things change,
Okay.
naturally,
Right.
and when you're like absolute in your thinking, that could be a problem, right?
Uh,
Because if
sure.
you're saying you do this always this way, and this way is not going to be that way forever, you would clash with. Yeah, you know what I mean. You can have a potential clash with others, and the environment that doesn't align with your belief.
Right. I think that for a lot of people, when it comes to running into that, where it's like, oh well, these are my beliefs, and then when the future comes, or like when the time comes, and that their beliefs are no longer
The
like
story
capable of
changes a
being
bit,
controlled.
right?
Well, yeah. Well, there's two things that has to happen.
Uh
Either the
huh.
story changes a bit to fit the narrative that's happening, or those people are no longer a part of the narrative because they're not doing the same thing that they were doing before. Now that they're doing different things and the narrative hasn't changed, those people are now Lutherans instead of Christians.
Okay. There.
So every time somebody has every time somebody's liked the initial like premise of Christianity, they're like, "Wow, I really like this idea, but I want to change it." It's just another form of Christianity. There's so many. Oh, we're pescatarian or we're Episcopalian, and we do this instead, and we do that instead, and we're Seventh Day Adventists. You know what I mean? It's like it's all the same shit, but these people just want to worship or do things in different ways, and because the narrative isn't shifting with them as times change,
Hmm.
they have to create a new narrative to shift with times changing. So if people don't get or if the narrative doesn't get with the times, people end up not being a part of that same narrative anymore.
Yeah. You think like with mysticism in a person taking something literal, if that could be a good thing, and
It
where
depends.
and where you're taking it literal to the extreme, it's kind of like you say, you can get a meaning from a story, right? But I mean,
Sure.
like, maybe if you really believe everything about that story, no
Well,
longer
that can
metaphorically
cause
but
problems too,
literally,
right?
you
No, yeah, that can easily cause problems. If somebody has convinced you to fully believe in a story, even if there's not like a excuse me, if there isn't any like reality or divinity to it, and there's just like a story being told, and people are like, "Oh, well, why should we listen to the story?" Well, it has to have the story in itself has to have some sort of merit, right? Like
no,
it
no,
has to.
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, that story just that the story, that could be looked at as a metaphor. It is such a good story in the times that you're in and how to go about living your life, that maybe it's kind of like, you know what, maybe we should like take this more seriously.
Well, I think that might have been. I think that was actually likely what it was when it was going on back in the day. Is because
Okay, you're saying so it might have
people.
started off as a story potentially.
Well, not even. I mean, most certainly it started as a story because I don't believe in like the divinity of a god. Like, so to me, it's all a story. But it most certainly started
And,
out as a story.
and stories to explain things metaphorically is a good way to explain things.
Until you come across the actual root cause of it, yeah, I think that, like,
No, I
I
mean
don't think it, I don't.
when you watch a
Hold on, like,
movie,
I
you
don't
know
think
it's a
it's bad.
metaphor.
I don't
But
think
I'm
it's
saying when you
bad to
watch a
spin a
movie,
narrative to say like, if we don't know how thunderstorms work, if we just don't get it, I don't think it's necessarily bad tribute like something to the storm for us to be able to make sense of it at the time. But I think that what changes is the times, and that after we figure out why lightning bolts form and why thunderstorms form and all that shit, that we need to let that go.
okay.
So they serve a
So
utility to a point.
okay, so it could be a good and it could be a bad
Yep.
potentially. It's all relative
I think
potentially
it's more like it's a good for a certain amount of time until we find a better good.
because shit changes, right?
Yeah, because
Eventually,
shit changes.
it's like okay, this is gonna fit, but it's not gonna fit forever.
Exactly. This fit for a good while. We've figured out some extra stuff. It's time for a different fit. That'll happen to almost everything eventually.
Yeah, because the story won't align with reality because reality changed on you.
It's yeah, it's not that yeah, pretty much. I would
It's
go ahead and agree with that.
okay. So so the conclusion that I'm coming up with, folks that would push it, kind of like how JP is pushing it, is that you don't want to say that there's no such thing as God because it could be good to take it very seriously up to the point where you take it literally, right?
It could be it's good to take it up to a point until you figure
Potentially
well,
good,
until
not
you
will be
it's
good, not
potentially good. But
yeah.
it's potentially good to take it up to a point until you can figure things out another way. Because to me anyway, God is like a stopgap between understanding, like to like not understanding and understanding. Like if you don't understand something and you don't feel like understanding it, you can just put God there. And to me,
Yeah. It's a good blanket, right? To wrap
yeah, and
yourself
so and because of that, I think we
of
gotta
the
at least
unknown.
yeah. To me, I want to be on the other side of that blanket all the time. I don't want to
You want to be in
quit.
the know.
Yeah, I don't want to quit when somebody says like, oh well, this happens, and it's like, well, why? It's like, well, God. It's like, I think we can find a better explanation. You know
But
what I
God
mean?
will tell you why. He'll tell you why in your head.
Well, you get that, and then you don't get your answer. You know what I
But
mean? Ever.
he'll tell you in your head, wouldn't he?
I mean, well, if he was real, I imagine that we would all have some sort of knowledge about him. Like,
Well,
if we were like, don't
he's not
the
real.
Christians say something about he's got like his something his love or some crap written on our hearts or something like that. Uh, like and so we all know him. I've never felt like a like at least after I hit the age of reason and I wasn't like told by other people how to feel. I've never felt this like god warmth. You know what I mean? I've never had this feeling inside my body where like I know God is real for sure. Like that's
No, but
never
I'm saying like the metaphor
well the metaphor
for
of God.
the unknown of it being all knowing and all powerful. All reality can be all powerful, right? So it could be in
Eh,
reality that's beyond your understanding. God can be a representation, a metaphorical representation of that unknown
yeah,
that you're trying to understand, but you cannot understand. So you call it God, and you can receive God's wrath just like you can receive the environment's wrath if you don't understand it. If you can't understand your surroundings, if you can't get identify things for what they are and reason things out in probability outcome, right? In order to survive the environment, you get its wrath. Just like God, you get his wrath, right? Who
Metaphorically, yeah.
gives you meaning.
Metaphorically, if you go against these uh,
The
set
forces of
ideals
reality.
that we've come across in society that we have declared as reality, then yeah, you're going to get this metaphorical God punishment from us while you're alive, and then we're gonna tell you that things are just going to be terrible after you're gone. Like for
If you
you
don't
after
get
you're gone too.
Yeah, because if you don't get a meaning from the environment and you approach it in an irrational way, there's a good potential that you can suffer
Well,
bad.
yeah. Well, in the case of somebody what the metaphor of God would be in that sense is like the punishment and reward system for life. And because there isn't one of those, and it's a made up one, and it's just like, oh well, this is the made up reward system, punishment system for life. People have obviously since like time immemorial gone and chosen different versions of this. Like
Mm.
you get to do this for this long, and then like you go to fucking heaven, and if you don't do that, you don't go to heaven. And I think the interesting part about it is a lot of the times, like if you look at Egyptian mythology, you had to have a certain amount of wealth to go to heaven. Like you couldn't just die and go to heaven, even if you were a good person. There was a massive period of time where you had to have a certain level of wealth to make it into heaven.
Yeah.
It didn't even matter if you were good or not. So like you can and that metaphorically is like you should just be rich, and if you're not rich, you're basically worthless. So a lot of these metaphors that we can get from these like strange you know compilations of like what is people consider divinity writing is it's these metaphors are they're rarely good anymore, and I think that they only lasted for a certain amount of time back in the day until we got to a point where we realized they weren't important and we don't need them anymore. But some people still hold on to them, like people hold on to ancient relics because they're so invested.
The funny thing that when you mention heaven is like you can see that in reality now it's kind of like if you do understand things, right, you can get pleasure, right, because you just more grounded in reasoning and how to go about things.
Hmm.
So that in itself can represent heaven. So if you understand the unknown, if you try to
Well,
if you know
yeah.
if you end up overcoming something that is beyond your understanding, you could approach it and deal with it in a way that is more beneficial to you
Right. No, for
potentially.
sure.
So that, I guess, that would be a representation of heaven.
Well, like heaven, a meta, like a of non-physical, like metaphorical representation of heaven is like, at
You're
least
being
from my,
rewarded.
at least in my eyes, it's the people around. It's everything being taken care of.
Yeah, but I'm
Like,
saying
like,
like
like that's what the metaphorical version of heaven would be for me. Like, if I woke up one day, right, Nivek, and I went to go pay my bills, and my bills were paid, and then I went to go wash my car, but my car was already washed. And I went to go feed and walk my dog, but my dog was already fed and walked. Like everything being taken care for me would be my version of heaven. Like even like that would be closer to heaven to me than anything metaphysical or like from a religion.
yeah, I understand.
But I am going to pop out of here to see if anybody else wants to pop in and talk to you about it because I've given my answer on who I think Jordan Peterson's God is. I think it's just Yahweh. I really do. I don't. I think that it's Yahweh and he's
So
removed
you believe he's
divinity from him.
religious then?
Yeah. Well, so I believe that he's removed divinity from Yahweh and moved into a story with it and saying that the story is particularly important because it conveys all of these important messages and shit. And I think he's using that as kind of a way to engage with people that are not necessarily Christian or believing in God, so that that like atheists and people like that are more comfortable listening to him. But I do believe his God is actually Yahweh, but he's just taken divinity away from Yahweh and tried to broaden the ability of people's metaphorical understanding of the story of the Bible, which I don't personally think is all that good of a story to begin with, as a story itself. but that's just my opinion.
I kind of
Again,
had I kind of had a view set that he it was more about seeing it very taking the metaphor in a way that is very serious.
right.
So it could in seeing it as a metaphor, but not wanting to not wanting to acknowledge it that way, because it is a good thing to be delusional, and it's a good thing to take things metaphorically to the extreme in being delusional in it being more beneficial. So it's
Right.
kind of like if you're taking a
Well,
metaphor that's good, what better way to take a metaphor that's good than to believe it literally to the to the most extreme, in a way in where it is something that has to be obeyed, or you'll be punished. But the thing about
mhm.
that is, it's kind of like you taking that and you bring it in. It's affecting reality, and
Well, he doesn't.
you
As far as I'm more, he doesn't like actually like. So the metaphor for Jordan Peterson when it comes to like a god, I don't think that he like. I think that he takes it all so metaphorically to the point where like, well, you're not gonna go to hell in a literal physical place if you do this, but you're gonna feel like you're in hell. You know what I mean? Like your brain's gonna be fighting against you, and you're gonna hate the decisions you've made. So, like by making all these bad negative decisions or having all these sins, you're like putting yourself through a hell.
yeah, and God is the
But
metaphor of that
well,
punishment,
well,
of
he's
reality.
he's the metaphor of the reason why, and his metaphor for God, at least as far as I'm aware, is that like the story itself is a good story, not that like God is good or God as himself is like is a good concept. And so I think that if somebody weaved a story that didn't involve God that was just as good as the Bible to Jordan, I think that he would say the same things he says about that, but the Bible to that story. And I think we could probably get him away from this weird, like, pseudo divinity shit.
When you mentioned heaven, the other thing about heaven, it's like, if you understand and you get meaning of the reality around you, you could have an idea how to go about things in a positive way for the benefit of your well-being. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So it's kind of like you're being rewarded
Well,
for
again, a a
being
heaven on
knowledgeable.
earth could be made for me easily. Like, it does like, my heaven on earth
No, but
is
no.
so
I'm
easy.
not saying that's what the real story is about. It's about religion's really a metaphor of reality.
Mhm.
It's a metaphor of, you know, you if you get your meaning from God. You know what
Well,
I mean?
from
But then
well
again, you get your meaning from the environment. You get your meaning from reality, and you
well, I
get
mean,
understanding
I
and
guess that's from
recognize.
Jordan Peterson's standpoint. I certainly do not get any like, there's very little to no meaning if all that comes from a god for me.
No, no, no. I mean, like people in general, like a person, they get their meaning from God, who represents the environment. And
Cool. Let me get out of here so you can get a talking
okay,
with Pilati, because I've been taking up a bunch of time. So, yeah, plus I already gave you my answer. I'm going to reiterate for the room real quick what my answer was. I believe Jordan Peterson's God is Yahweh. I believe that he's removed divinity from Yahweh and put all of the importance on what he considers to be a really good story on the Bible. I don't think the Bible's a good story. I think it's actually an atrocious story. And I think that he, for some reason, has this weird thing about continuing on this story because he believes it's a really good one, and I just don't see where he comes from that. So I'm out with that. It was nice talking to you, Nivek. I appreciate you having me on.
okay. Thanks for stopping by.
No problem, man.
Hey, Bloody, how's it going?
Hey Nivek, how you doing, man?
Fine,
Well,
thanks.
regarding the topic, Jordan Peterson was born Catholic. Maybe he was a nominal Catholic for the longest, became atheist for a while. This is from him, and just had experience with the Catholic or the same God of the Catholics and Christian in Christendom, and he admitted to it in several videos. I believe it was a genuine experience because he was like crying, and that showed part of his genuineness. Yeah, I believe he was speaking passionately from the heart. So I believe he's looking into that. Whether he's returning to Roman Catholicism or Protestantism, we would love him over here with the Protestant group. That great intellectual man,
Mm-hmm.
becoming a theologian would be awesome. I believe he has an experience with God, and he needs to be more educated in the things of the Lord. So he is a form of Christian. What denomination? I don't know. But I'm hoping that he jumps over to the Protestant side. But it doesn't matter if he stays with the Catholics. Once you've had an experience with God, you're not going to go back to anything. That's for sure.
Oh,
So
okay. You're saying that he's conflicted in.
you have to understand, Nivek, that he's a psychologist. He, by training, by education, he's an evolutionist. He's a Jungian. He's a Sigmund Freudian. So right now he deals with all those philosophies. Right now he's probably having a lot what you call cognitive dissonance. So there's truth that he has to replace. Before I didn't believe in God. Now I believe in God. This is what Sigmund Freud told me. So he has conflicting things that only God could clear through the Bible. So he is being challenged. But either way, whether he's agnostic or Catholic, this guy's a great mind. Have you seen him? I'm pretty sure you heard several of his debates and several of his podcasts, YouTube and his own podcast. This guy's an awesome mind. Most critical thinkers that are clinicians don't even think like that. This guy's like a philosopher in our time. We have an honor to have someone in the speaking world that has been vilified,
Mm-hmm.
hated because he speaks the truth. He used to be
Um.
he used to be of the left wing type, and he had an enlightenment, and now he's on the conservative side. This guy's a thinker. That's
So
why he
so
doesn't mind. Go ahead.
you're saying the conflict that he's having isn't really about him. It's more about him being, I guess, a philosopher. I mean, a psychologist.
Yeah, well, a scholar, because he's dealt with all these ideologies, philosophies. Some that he's embraced, some that he's just embracing because of the field he specializes in. So you're going to have a lot of questions, and only someone at his level could reach him. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's an arrogant ass that he won't listen to anybody else. No, but somebody with his capacity, training, and level will deal with him one on one, and he'll grow quickly because the guy's a reader. The guy's an intellect. He's not just anything. I mean, we have a lot of people go to school and have their PhDs, but they're quacks. There's a lot of hacks out there in education.
What do you
They
think
don't
about the
amount to
view of a metaphorical God?
the metaphysics. You could look at it like that, but I think it's beyond the metaphysical. The biblical part. I mean, there's
No, no,
the
no, no.
metaphysicians.
Not the
Hold on.
metaphysical. I mean metaphor, as in
Oh, metaphor. Sorry, metaphor. Yeah.
you
Uh,
use a story
okay.
to explain
Sorry.
something, and where it would be
Well,
good to use the story.
if you look at the Bible, it's full of metaphors, of similes, hyperboles, exaggerated language, and I think it's called anamorphism. I might be wrong. Where it uses animals, where it uses plants to describe God, um, and things like that. It uses God as a chicken, and his believers as little chicklets. It uses God as a dove for the Holy Spirit. It uses God as an eagle who will defend us. So yeah, the
It's
the
kind of
the
like I don't think I don't think maybe he doesn't take it literal, but I think he thinks about seeing the value of taking it seriously, and where if you take a metaphor seriously in of a story that could be beneficial to whatever time you're in, that's a good thing.
I believe too that Nivek, that the language has to be respected in its genre, which is written, the
Hmm.
prose. But in regards to Jordan Peterson, I don't even want to say how he's used. I believe there is things. There is some episodes from just to get a kind of understanding of him, that he did like a biblical series,
Yeah.
and it's important to look at it. I don't know if you've seen it. I'm pretty sure you have some clips here and there. They're all over YouTube. And he describes, it's just the way he describes things. It's like wow. Like if you've seen the series on kind of like freedom of speech, I think it has to do with Pinocchio or
Yeah.
something like that. It's kind of incredible how he extrapolates. He goes really deep
You think he
into it.
doesn't
I'm
want to
like,
be defined?
it's possible. It's possible. You have to understand that the man is a
Because
self-made man.
sometimes people don't like being defined,
Well, of course, he
and
doesn't. I dare not.
it's
I
kind of
dare not
like
even put him in a box.
they want to be between one thing and the other.
He needs to come out in his own time. He needs to come out in his own time when he
But
said that.
don't you see the freedom and the luxury of not having to commit to anything in defining?
Yeah. Okay. That's true. That's true. You're right.
There's an attraction there. There's a power in that, isn't there?
Well, yeah, because you want to express your free will, your volition. You want to do it on your
Well,
time.
you can't be wrong on anything if you don't hold and commit to something. Somebody can't necessarily attack you on anything because there's no stance to attack you on.
Yeah, but then what are you going to stand on? Either you stand on something or you fall for everything. What are you going to stand on? I stand on Christianity. I stand on, and you know, we had this discussion before, another topic regarding Coach Kennedy and all that. Where I stand in Christianity, and I take the good and the bad that comes with it. Like the guest that you had before, he said that he didn't like the Bible because of this or that. I disagree. I would challenge people who think like that. Why don't you like the Bible and what? Because God is a judging God. God is He punishes as He promises. I mean, come on. I mean, bring up the topic, bring up the argument. I mean, there's reason people just put God in a box sometime, and they just look at one part and they just focus on that, and God is that, and that's not right. You have to read the whole Scripture to get an understanding of God. And you'll see it's a benevolent, loving God that sent His beloved Son to give us salvation through His death and resurrection on a cross, and off the cross, obviously too, after the resurrection.
Why do you believe in God?
Because God believed in me. God came to me. I didn't come to God on my own term. It was impossible for me to come to God on my own term. He came to me. He visited me in the middle of the nightclubs. He
How did he
visited
come?
me when I was young and I wanted to drink and party and I didn't want to grow up in a Christian home. God came to me, and not just one time, several times. And God showed me. That's why when you have, again, an experience, because yeah, the experience, some people in some churches, they would not experience. Well, no, everything's experiential. You have to experience, otherwise it won't make a difference in you. If I just read to you the good book and you never experience it in your life, of course you're just going to read it like any other book. And you could look at Homer's Iliad and all that, right? And all those great stories, right? And you're not gonna you're gonna believe them for what they wrote, but not because you lived it, but you believe the testament that they wrote, whatever genre they were written on, whether fiction or nonfiction. In regards to the Bible, I know it's not a mythological book. I know the stories are true.
Uh,
So I believe like they believe, but of course those believers were greater than me, like the apostles, because the
when you
feet.
mention one thing, when you mention experiences, there could be value in experiences and where they're brought into stories and then passed down. But those stories that you go by in an absolute way in relation to the environment could change eventually over time. Where
No, you know why? Time
well,
passes.
let's say for example, you go by a story. You say about, okay, you walk this path, and you just, it's like you just go and you make a left turn and your right turn. You don't necessarily know the reason why. You just do that, right? Because that was passed down, and that would lead you to a better situation. That might not always be the case. You know what I mean? There's
Well,
storms, there's earthquakes.
well. In regards to wisdom, if I tell you, do not walk too much over the cliff, or otherwise you'll fall to your death, is that something that passes with time and is not true, or that words of wisdom will work then like now? If I tell you, do not get in front of the carriage, let's say in the 1800, right, the 1500, because the soldiers, the knights are coming. Do not get in front of the horses with the carriage; they'll run you over. Is that true then, and is it all true now, or did it only work in one time?
Well, yeah, I mean, you could have things work in different times,
But that's what I'm trying to tell you. The Bible
but not
is
always.
how's that not always? Let me tell you what.
Well, what I'm saying is the experiences of the past,
Uh-huh.
the things that you do is a lot of things that we do is reasoning things out, and
But yeah, but you cannot
it
reason
not.
your way out of, for
But
example, unless you. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm saying like a lot of things people do, it is through taking in information and reasoning things out and go through in prediction pretty much. I mean,
Oh,
but it's so a lot. It's not. So the things you do, you won't necessarily know it would absolutely work out or not. At the end of the day, but the best you can do is taking as much information as you can,
okay. But
reason it
is
out.
what you
Can I finish,
do?
please?
Yeah, yeah. Go. Sorry.
Reason it out as best as you can and come to a logical conclusion of outcome and probability, and move forward in predicting, right? Because the things that you do when you get up in the morning, you don't know absolutely what is going to happen.
Correct.
You have to reason things out. You can't just put a blanket over your eyes, ears, and just go off of the past experience and just walk and imitate the past experiences. There are changes in the environment that you have to in real time adjust to as you go about your day.
Exactly. Okay. Can I come in now?
Right?
Okay. So what I'm trying to convey is the words of wisdom will always work. Like, for example, you mentioned waking up in the morning. You do 7 things, maybe, or 10 things before you walk out the door, right? You got to get up. You go to the restroom, do your thing, get ready, shower, come out, get dressed, maybe then go prepare breakfast, right? After you've got dressed and everything, before you leave the house. So there's several steps. Do I have to relearn that, or is that just comes to memory because I already done it about 1,000 times in my life? Me at 49, I think I've done it about over 1,000 times in my whole lifetime. Just throwing out a number, not exactly. So in the Bible, when it gives you words of wisdom, believe it or not, I mean, I don't need to be a scientist to prove that what God has taught me is not going to come to truth. If God is telling me in the Proverbs,
So, can you drive on
eh,
a road from past experience
can I drive on the road from past experience?
to a destination? Yeah,
If I've
because you
written
drove on
written
it before.
if I've never done it before, or I've done it before.
No, because you drove on it before in a past
Well,
experience.
yeah, it's by experience. I know how to get from point A to point
So you
B.
can close your eyes then and just repeat the
No,
process
it's
that
not. That's
you did
not being
yesterday.
logical. That's not being logical. I cannot do it like that. I mean, I'm not gonna guess it. I have to have my eyes open, my what is it called, my
Yeah,
five
because
functional senses.
you're taking in new information and you're adjusting yourself.
Correct, correct. But the whole experience is not new. Whether I take the back road or the front road, I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get there because I already know how to get there, and I know what shortcuts to take. I probably won't do 4 hours. I'll do 3.5 or three and 20 minutes, whatever. So I'll take less time. But I've been there. But obviously, I have to have my senses available, my hearing, my seeing, and I have to have drank a good amount of coffee if I didn't get a good night's rest to be focused for that 3 or 4 hour ride. So yeah, but of course, nobody's going to be able to go like a blind man. I'll end up killing myself in a matter of seconds, or killing someone along the way. So
So
nobody does.
if
Yeah.
you have a thin sheet of ice and you have a 30,000 pound truck, and you never saw a past experience of a truck falling through the ice, based off of your understanding of the ice and based off your understanding of the truck, you don't think you can just come to a logical conclusion that the truck will go through the ice?
Not necessarily.
You
How do you think you have ice road trucking in Canada? They
okay?
measure the amount of ice, and sometimes.
So you have like you have like let me see, like a centimeter, a millimeter thin sheet of ice, and you have a heavy 30,000 pound truck on it. You don't think the truck will go through it?
It's
Okay,
possibly
forget.
it's possibly it's possibly
Okay.
can.
Forget that. You have a thread going across a road,
Uh huh.
right? And you have a 10,000 pound truck going down the road. You never saw a truck go through a piece of thread across the road before. You don't have to have past experience to reason things out in outcome that it would just go through the thread, right? More likely.
more likely. But
Yeah.
but if that thread is, and I'm going to compare it. I'm sorry, I'm using the truck road experience because there's these shows and there's a reason why they have them. So people can learn. There are these roads in India that are not two
What were
ways.
you gonna say about the thread?
So basically, on the thread is if you don't have enough thread to ride on, you're going off the cliff or you're going off the road, whatever it is. You're going off the cliff to your
I
doom.
don't get what you're saying.
Well, basically, look, what I'm saying is if you have enough pavement, enough road to make your trip, you're going to go with confidence on that road all as many times as you have to,
What?
all the days of your life. Whether they have to repave it or rebridge it, whatever, you're going to ride on it because you have that confidence that somebody built it and it's being maintained by the state, and you've driven over that thing about 1,000 times in your lifetime. I'm just throwing out numbers.
You're
So
telling me you don't want to call those off your senses and coming across new things that are coming about in the environment in just going off of a past experience. That's contradicting,
why would that be contradicting necessarily?
because if you want to go off of belief, right? You can close off your senses and just go off of that. Why not? Why when there comes to things that you don't understand, you don't try to seek understanding, or do you know everything?
No, not at all. Never. I do
Okay,
seek
so
understanding.
if you don't know everything, then you're taking in real time information and you're coming
Yeah,
to
but that's a new
conclusions.
experience. That's a new experience. So I am taking in new information because most likely I didn't know. Like for example, I'm about to
That's
go
my
learn.
point. That's my whole point. It's a new experience.
Yeah, it's a new experience, but
But you say you're about
for
past experience.
no, okay, but in regards to what we were talking about, the topics. If I'm experiencing, let's say, how to drive trucks,
Yeah.
those big rigs, that's a new experience in every sense of the word. I've never driven those types of trucks. I've driven a car. I've driven both cars, automatic and standard, but I've never driven a truck. So yeah,
Yeah.
in
So
that
you
sense,
can't
what you're
just go
saying,
off of past experiences. You go off of real time new experiences.
of course. But in
Yeah.
regards to Christianity, it's not something you just pick up and try. It's something that's been tested for millennia already. Past
Well,
testaments, past testaments of past believers have fulfilled those promises in their lives. So all they could give is testament to what they've lived out. Christ was the first one to
the
start.
past is the future.
Well, you learn
The
from the
past, I
past.
guess, I guess, I guess, like you're saying, like the past is the future because everything that has happened.
Will
Uh,
that has happened, will happen, will is happening, and will continue to happen. And you know what? There's a part of the Bible, believe it or not, Nivek, where God says that He makes the future from the past. That's
mhm.
why it's the only book in the whole world that could say it's the history. What is it? It's the history of the future. People say, "How could you say history of the future if the future hasn't happened?" Well, it's the only book that has called out the future from past time. It's
Yeah,
the
but you
only book.
talked about new experiences.
That doesn't violate that. It's new. It's going to be a new experience for anybody that believes. It's going to be new experience because it's new. It's somebody different. I can't base my life experiences on your experience in life, and you cannot base it on mine. You have to live out your own experiences. That's why you have to test it for yourself. You could believe what
Yeah.
everybody says. You
A
could
new,
read the
a
many
new,
books.
a new experience is a new experience, and it's a past experience, right? I guess it's all relative, right? Because
No, it is not relative.
things could have already have happened, and maybe for you, it's something that has never happened yet, and
Well,
it
again, it depends on what exactly are you pointing to.
eh,
If you're pointing, I gave you the example of the truck. I've never driven a rig. That'll be a total new experience. Have other truckers, have my nephew who's a trucker, driven a truck? Yes, he has. He could tell me for the last 11 years that he's driven one. And he's constantly telling me, don't continue in information technology. Jump over to the truck. You'll make $100,000 a year. I am tempted because I want to make big money. So
If you're
do I,
validating a past experience, you're validating a new experience because a past experience at one time was a new experience, right?
but isn't that also, for
You get
example,
what I'm
in the
saying, right?
yes, 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 I am. I do get
So
know what
you
you're saying.
can't be
But
saying if you're saying like, well, it's not about the new experience. Well, that past experience that you were for was at one time a new experience. So you are, for new experiences because a past experience is a new experience, and every day we do have new experiences. You can't.
correct.
They're not separate from each other.
Well, yeah. Well, in philosophy, it's like what it says. You probably heard of this if you're taking philosophy, which I'm pretty sure you have. You never step in the same
Not
river
really.
twice. You can step in the same river, but when it says that, it's a deep understanding.
I hear people
People
make
will say,
that
"Wait a minute, I
argument.
crossed that river 100 times in my lifetime." Yeah, but you never stepped in it because there's been many changes in
I
your
hear
life,
that.
and
I
it.
hear people make the argument about like this should be upheld because you are upholding this norm that is part of the culture and it should remain. But that thing that you're holding up and you want to conserve, that is of the past. That at one point wasn't of the past, right? And it was something new. It's kind of like if anything before the things that you if anybody before what before if those who are before the things that you are for now were against change, then the thing that you are for now wouldn't have happened.
That's possibly true. I mean, that's kind of the story of Judaism and Christianity. Judaism was before Christianity. Without
So it
Judaism,
makes
there is
no
no
it makes no
Christianity.
sense. That's why I'm trying to make the argument. It makes no sense to be against change.
But nobody's saying you cannot be against change. Every day you experience something new. Even if it's kind of repetitive, it's never the same.
Well, that's a lot of. I mean, I hear some of that argument with JP. It's kind of like, well, uh, this in the past, uh, it people went by it for such a long time. So what does that mean? That like we shouldn't change? I mean, like if the past had its way, we'd be on horseback. No.
No, because
Well,
for
okay, wait, wait.
example,
Let me let me get this straight. If I say if anybody that try to do anything different, and I'll kill you, you know what I mean, and things are going to remain, and I'm a brutal, oppressive, dictating, dogged, violent, oppressive person, and any type of change against the cultural norm, I'll burn you at the stake. You don't you I'm saying like if things are stopped in leaving in changing from how they are in making sure that they stay. I don't I don't know what you mean. You know what I mean? Like if I
no, no,
if I
I
tell
get
you
you.
not
Yeah,
to if I tell you not to do anything, and you're to remain if you're to remain how you are, and then a person threatens to kill you, and I make sure things are the way they are. What do you mean they won't change? Of course they won't change because I'm making sure that won't happen. And the thing about it is it's hard to stop change anyway. But I'm just saying like it
can I?
you could have cultures where it's very strict in not in being against change.
There, well, that's why you have, and I'm not trying to attack a particular religion, but I'm going to use the Muslim faith. Many advocates, especially an old Indian, I'm not sure if he was Pakistani or Indian, prime minister, like maybe 15 years ago, said it. I forgot his name, so I apologize. He said it. We need a renaissance for the Muslim faith. And if you look at their history, if you look at some of the countries like Saudi Arabia that just barely allowed a couple of years ago women the right to drive, whereas other Muslim countries, kind of like Afghanistan, what did they do to women this week? They told them that they have to be fully burqa. They have to have the full burqa, so they could only see. You could only show your eyes. So some Muslims are going forward and making changes,
Well,
while
the thing
others are
about that
going
is when the
backward.
world changes around you, it's not as easy, right?
Well,
Like
no,
you
it's
might
not as
have,
easy,
like,
but
let's say you have your village and it stays the same. It stays the same no matter what. You know what I mean? You want to stay in whatever prehistoric times. You have everybody around you flying in planes, driving cars, and all that stuff. It's kind of like you're going to probably end up conforming. You know what I mean?
well,
And
yeah, we
no
have.
matter how
Uh,
dogged you are, you're going to want to get
uh,
into a car. You're going to want to get into a plane. You're going to want to get, you're going to want to use computers. It's gonna either you do that, or you, I guess you, or if either adapt, or you know what I mean,
or you
you
get left behind. You in the Stone Age. You have, like, for example, right now under communism, the country of Cuba, that was communist since 1959. They're considered to be at least 75 years in the past. I'm just throwing out a number. I'm not exact. So what does that mean? Well, they just had an explosion, probably old machinery, something they should have updated a long time ago. It killed about 22 to 35 people and it left many injured.
oh, you're Cuban?
There, yeah, Cuba.
Oh no, I'm
I'm
saying you're
not,
Cuban.
no, I'm not Cuban. I'm Mexican. So what happened from the perspective of the world? They're basically saying, well, that's a tragedy to happen. It should have never happened to anyone. But tragedies will occur to anyone at any time. But if they were to be perhaps a more modern society with modern day equipment, modern buildings, and newer cars and technology, Wi-Fi, all that stuff, everything like the United States, they perhaps wouldn't have those kind of accidents because they
You
would have had
saying Cuba's
sensors.
not open to change?
Under communism, is not, because those changes come with a consensus. In other words, there's embargoes that the United States, the European Union has put, the United Nations have put over Cuba, that until it changes its communist government, then investment will flow in, more monies and development and all that. But it has gone ahead. It's developed in its academics in the medical field. It's developed some of the best doctors. And according to statistics, I think it's on the web. I saw it not long ago. They have the most when it comes to STEM research, science, technology, engineering, and math. They have the most inventors right now, and Cuba and the Philippines are the highest right now of all the developing worlds. They have the most women, and this was specifically for women. Most
Yeah,
women that hold the most patents and that are inventors, and they beat the U.S. right now. That's incredible. That's just saying somebody put attention in their academics and their equality. If you want to use that word equality when it came to the sexes, the genders, women. So there is some advancement, but they could go beyond that if they were to modernize a lot of their stuff. They wouldn't be driving 1950 cars. Not that it's wrong to drive 1950 cars, but they wouldn't be driving those old Chevys and Fords. They'll be driving newer cars. Their roads would be fixed. Their buildings would be in better conditions. They have a lot of abandoned buildings for lack of funding.
yeah,
So they survive, but they're not advanced. They're still trailing back. So in response to what you're saying, that could be used as an example.
yeah.
Uh,
You have to
you
be
know,
careful because the opposite side of communism is, it could be uh, an oppressive uh, monarchy state.
well, yeah, that's on the downside. Uh, yeah, I'm looking at the positive. Of course, the ills of communism I didn't mention. There's many good things that came out of Stalinist Russia, but at the cost of life to get what they wanted, to build the jets that they needed, the planes that eventually machinery of war in order to fight against the great American empire, an example, because it was the Cold War. So there is some good things, but there are also some bad things, and that is they usually work people to death and to get the job done. But do they get it done? They do.
Hmm.
That's why they're a fierce enemy of the United States. They're still an
I'm
enemy,
just
like
saying
it or not.
sometimes people should be careful and where when they talk about one thing as if
I'm
it's separate
I'm only
from.
trying to
Let
point
me
out the
finish.
good,
Let
just
me
because.
just
Yeah.
finish. As if
Go
they're
ahead.
separate from another. A lot of times there's cause and effect with things, and with Russia, they were the last to undergo coming up from serfdom in being an oppressive monarchical, you know.
Well, yeah.
And,
What
and
is
the
it,
thing about it is that
1992?
because
Right.
of one extreme, they fled over to the opposite, and there could be like it's kind of like would you want to be in a in a in a like a corporate tyrannical state as a slave,
No, well, that'll be serfdom. No, nobody would want that. No, I
or
mean,
you or and the thing about that is the unfortunate repercussions of that is that people go into the horrors of communism because you run from one extreme and you think like, okay, if I go to the opposite then that'll be good. Neither extremes are good of a communism or an
or a
or in a
tyrannical,
court
yeah.
or corporate or being under being a slave under corporate tyranny or being a serf under monarchy. And
I believe that that happened more in the earliest, the first part, as the United States was in development. Remember when they had
but
children that were working?
when you bring up Cuba, that's what Cuba was fleeing, right? It wanted its
The,
independence,
yeah, well,
and
the Cuban people,
it was aligned with the U.S.
yeah, people
It
flee
was
oppressive systems like that.
it was fleeing monarchical rule in wanting to form a democracy, and it wanted to get from under a hierarchy system, and it wasn't really about being communism at first. It's just that with Batista,
The
it was a
problem,
difficult.
the problem, Nivek, with Batista is that he, even though there was freedom, he was a gangster. There was corruption. The Italian mob and God knows what other mobs were there. So there was money in the casinos. People lived better in a way, but there was still poverty. So there was many inequalities, but there was a lot of corruption. And first, I think he was president, and then he became dictator. If I'm right, I might be wrong on that. But the whole thing is, it was much better than it is now, per se, to a certain extent. But every dictator, every tyrant, they have their advantages and disadvantages. But
But I'm
they
telling you, you're pointing out one thing: America fled from the far right of corporate tyranny during the Civil War. It was fleeing from serfdom, number one, with the revolution, but it was trying to shake that old past of tyranny uh, in in the Civil War of slavery, where it was going against the ideals of democracy, of freedom, justice, and equality, and
and human
it was
justice,
being.
freedom, civil rights for black Americans.
Well, no, it wasn't about. It was more about the country and what road the country would go down and what it would become. But that's another thing. I'm gonna
Okay.
invite you into the speakers. Okay.
All right. Cool.
Let me see how I do that. Uh, okay. Robert, hello. Robert, can you hear me? You can hit the mute button. Hit the button to unmute. Are you there? Robert, are you there? Am I muted? Bloody, can you hear me?
Here.
Oh.
Probably Robert walked away for a little bit or something.
Oh.
So anyway, continue, Nivek, as he comes back.
Yeah. Yeah, I see both extremes as on the
Nivek,
far.
let me ask you,
Go ahead.
why why are you interested in Peterson's experience with God? What prompted you to bring this topic?
Well, he's a big part of the social discord, so you know, a man of our time, so it's kind of like
In fact, let me
it,
let me
it,
let me
it,
reiterate.
it makes sense to bring him up is why I bring him up because he's a big part of the Discord.
Okay. So, but let me reiterate it in the terms like like an atheist. Why would such an intellectual mind be bothering with such fairy tale from the past?
Does this mic work?
Oh,
Oh
Robert.
yes, it does. Hi
Hey,
Robert,
hi.
how you doing?
I'm all right. Um, I've been
Yeah,
listening to your conversation with Bloody here.
yeah. Um, just going over the view of what you think JP might be. You think he might be religious? You think he might be see God as a metaphor, or you might
I think
be,
I think um
or he thinks himself as God?
no, not all. I think he's definitely spiritual. Um, but I also believe that he believes himself uh, in individualism,
He
or
convinced you
in
that he's spiritual. That's interesting.
I'm convinced that he is spiritual, or that he's at least seeking to be spiritual, or he's at least at the minimum trying to figure out how he feels about spirituality
Oh,
himself.
okay. So it's a process then.
I do think it's a process. I think I think what he does is the process of his own life. It's in his own process and through his own path. Um, he brings along many, many, many others, and teaching others is part of his own path and his own process through his own spirituality.
Okay, you think it's about psychology?
What part?
Well, so when it comes
What
to when it comes to the human mind, you
I think
you
what if I understand what
you,
you're
you
saying.
like what for you use you okay, so I guess it would be good to believe to cope.
Definitely believing is coping, or a mechanism to cope. I'm not saying it's coping. Uh, Faith is definitely a mechanism for coping with certain things, um, pain, suffering, life in general, or joys, and all kinds of things. It definitely is a coping mechanism. It's been proven over and over again, and through literature it's been shown that that's how people cope with a lot of things in their life, is to have some kind of faith or some kind of answer or some kind of truth or some kind of God or some kind of spirituality that humans use in order to justify their own existence. I think
Oh,
that's
you feel that way too?
I definitely no, I don't feel that way. I think that's what is shown. I think that
No, I mean,
through the
are you that way
literature
as
of,
well?
pardon me,
Are you that way as well?
I don't think so. Or perhaps I am, and I'm still on that path, and I just haven't ended up to the point where I believe I'm the same, but I probably am more the same than different. I mean, we all wish we were different, but I think we are all more the same than we are different.
Okay, so you
So I'm
haven't
probably
committed
just
to
saying that I'm
believing in
different, but I'm
God?
not. No, I don't say I believe in God, but I think that I definitely believe in some kind of no, I don't believe. No, I don't think I believe. I don't think I believe in God. I think I believe in good, but I think the problem relies. I think the problem is relies in in defining things, and nobody wants to define things um, in a manner that everyone agrees, and I don't think anyone will ever agree on a strict definition, and therefore it'll always be mysterious and fleeting, and it'll always feel like astrology in the way that you can never be wrong because it's everyone's truth and every individual person's truth. It'll always feel that way, and I don't think we'll ever be able to describe this perfectly.
You think thinks that there's a strong importance in the metaphorical God? So to kind of look at it in a way in where it's not a bad thing to think that way because good can come of it. So let's say it's not. So it's kind of like it's like you're hypnotizing yourself. It could be psychologically therapeutical as well, and where you're getting comfort,
I think
in something,
I
and
definitely understand what you're saying.
you can be hypnotizing yourself to do something
Absolutely. A lot of
that
people do
goes.
different things in order to better their lives and in different manners and
You're fitting into
even if it's
you.
unreal, even if it's totally fake and not part of reality, we'll do it and believe in it in order to better our lives, but we won't even know we're doing it because it's making it better. So
Yeah, you're
it's hard
adapting.
to be
It's kind of a culture.
it's hard. I think it's more. I think it's definitely no. You're right. I think you're totally right. It definitely is culture, but I don't think it's culture as in race or person culture. I think it's human culture, and I believe it stems from the from the thought process I've been going through while listening to you guys. I definitely think right now, from what I can tell right now,
Uh huh.
that it comes from passing down information,
Yeah.
and that at first before we were even smart enough and before we were able to survive, humans themselves, before we were able to survive long enough and easily enough to be able
Yeah.
to to link together large thoughts, as these ones are very large thoughts. They're thoughts that have very very long chains of logical chains. So before we could ever long time ago, when we were busy surviving,
Yeah.
there probably was no faith because we were so busy trying to find food and
Mm-hmm.
not die to a bear or other, I don't know, menace, or I don't know whatever. We're too busy trying to live past the age of 20, and or not even just making our child survive
Mm-hmm.
through nature. We're so busy doing that that I don't believe there was any kind of faith, uh very large amounts of faith. Probably they're like, oh my god,
Let me
a
dive
fire.
deeper into the psychology part when I was talking about
Well,
psychology.
I think you should give me a second
Go
because
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
I think you should give me a second because this might be a long, somewhat of a long link,
No, go ahead. Go
logical
ahead.
chain.
I'm interested.
But I think you'll grasp or understand my
Okay. Okay. Okay.
my larger vision of the entire, like the small, the little details that we're nitpicking about, which is like descriptions and um, definitions of people or faith or God, and all of these things we're trying to define and tell each other we're right or wrong, stems from the passing down of information, which becomes culture later on. So way back before we were um, even able to survive long enough, we were um, not having faith or large logical chains. Uh, so because of that, I don't think God existed ever. But as we became um, as we lived longer and we lived through and we were able to chain together larger thoughts and larger concepts and things that are way more metaphorical than real,
Yeah.
um, we I think that's where faith came. And then one person would, before even writing would exist, we would have more and more faith into things because we would see connections between, like, oh my god, if I do this, then maybe
Yeah.
this will happen because
Yeah.
last
The
time this
stories are
also
passed
happened.
down. I got you.
So so the stories keep getting passed down. Eventually, we start writing. So then we got communication and writing, and then those get passed down. So we are always repeating what happened from the previous generation of people before us, and then eventually there was the Bible,
It
which
sounds
is
like you're saying it's religion started off as a story to pass down to live
before it
by,
was
and then
even
it
a
ended up
story.
being
It
seriously
was
believed.
before it was even a story that was metaphorical or literal. I mean, sorry, before it wasn't even a story in a book. It was information from, or grunts. It was some kind of communication between two people in
I
order to
understand.
survive. And then from there on, it became literature, and then literature became the Bible. But in order to write those things and to pass them down more effectively, because at first it was from person to person, but then it was from book to person, and then it was from person to person across large areas of land because books existed. But the people who wrote the books or had the knowledge to write the books had to be rich enough and not be slaves, because you have to be smart enough to write. But the people who learned to write and read were people that were part of the richer classes of people. Because once we started being sedentary, the people who learned to read and write weren't busy hunting for the other families, or weren't busy farming, or the people that started to write, and the philosophers before, the people that got to communicate culture across the generations were um, either part of some rich or employed by the rich, or people that were considered wiser amongst their tribe. So those people would learn to read and write, and then those would pass down from generation to generation through literature, through kings and people who wanted their story told the way they wanted to be told. So I think the Bible has always been passed down from the perspective of someone that wasn't within the lower ranks. So the poor never wrote the story of the Bible. It was always the perception of people around the poor that wrote about the poor. And then that literature passed all the way down to us. So what I was saying is that we have the luxury today to be able to talk about these things, and we have so little. Our sufferance is so low right now compared to way back in the past. Our sufferance right now, our level of sufferance is so low, even in the poorest countries. Well, some people, I'm guessing, some people will be more suffering than others, but it's still lower. It's still a lot lower, in our survival rate is much higher than ever before. And for those reasons, we have problems and we have questions that were never asked before. So I think that we are so far ahead, and we live to be so old that we are contemplating describing faith and the existence of things that never existed, but that the beginning never existed. But now that we are so far away from suffering, they do exist.
Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of it, like what 99.9 species go extinct.
Oh, we will too. Don't worry.
Um, it's not like things could be absolute. The environment is vicious, and in the process of elimination, evolution, of adapting or going extinct, is very brutal. Human beings somehow they manage to get past that because they evolve with their minds instead of their bodies. Because with the mind you can take in knowledge and you can reason things out and you can manipulate your environment in order to adapt. You don't have to change yourself physically like
Absolutely.
an animal,
But we definitely
which
evolved
which would
much
take
faster
many.
because of literature and the ways that we evolved communication. We are so far ahead in communication; it's insane. No one can catch up to us on this planet whatsoever. Our communication is absolutely incredibly
Human.
fast.
I'm bringing up human beings and other animals that been ravaged by the environment. You know what I mean? Because it's not easy to adapt. That's how come I was bringing up like pretty much all species went extinct. Human beings, their evolution was about adapting to the harshness of a changing environment through the mind in adaptation, not through the physical, because it takes a while for you to physically evolve in order to adapt to a changing environment.
Absolutely.
And the thing about the mind is you can take in different information and you can come to different conclusions on the go. And the thing about what I think is natural in human beings, I think they have biases that are natural within them, and they have another part in where they naturally seek answers to things that they try to understand. Right? That's a natural human trait,
Yeah, I
and
think you're totally right, Nivek. But don't you think
those
that the
two
things that we
things,
try to
because
understand?
I see things as both. I see things as both. Whenever somebody points to me of one thing, I try to see the yang. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally.
So if you tell me there's a back, I'm gonna say, well, I think that there's a front, and it's like, well, no, you know what I mean? If you tell me there's a right,
Hmm.
well, isn't there a left? And it's like, of course not. You know what I'm saying? And it's hard for me to wrap my mind around that.
Well, I'd
So
like to say something to that, Nivek.
go ahead.
I like to say that the reason that you today are able to make
Uh,
that cognitive jump, because I think our minds and the intelligence of the human species has evolved, as you say, because of survival, and the least amount of suffering that we've lived through the time, the more that our suffering decreased and that our intelligence increased, because we learned how to survive longer, and therefore we could learn more things over the time we survived. We could learn more things because we live longer
Yeah.
and because we
You
have less
take
things to
things
take care
in, you
of.
take things into the past and you create new in the while you're
Yeah, and we extrapolate, and
as
then
well.
we jump, we make cognitive discoveries. Like, we jump from, hey, this fire is bright and it creates light, to, hey, this fire fucking burns. Like, careful. Oh shit, this fire cooks. Oh fuck, I can cook meat now. You know what I mean? Like, there's jumps in evolution because there's jumps in what we discover. But we always use something from previous discoveries to make the
Hmm.
future discoveries. And at some point, there's some kind of jump in intelligence because of particular discoveries.
You haven't let me finish what I was saying. I'm
Right, but
talking. Okay, go
you're
ahead. Go
absolutely
ahead.
correct. I'm just trying to say that you are able today to make that cognitive jump to say, hey, maybe there's a front. Hey, maybe there's a back. Hey, maybe I can see the yin and the yang. I can philosophize that. We can only philosophize that because we live this long now, and we only have these new problems because uh, we've solved all the previous problems of our lives. So, and now communication is so far ahead that we can have this conversation today. Like, I believe there's like details in which we're uh, trying to describe a nitpick that wouldn't exist otherwise.
Okay, so what I was trying to say is that I'm talking about two sides. You have a biased side, in where you are more relatable to something based off, you more lean to something because it's more of your environment and you're more familiar with it. And
Because you've experienced
you
it, for
want to you
example.
want to you want to and the thing about it is, absolutely it would make sense to keep that. But what was old hasn't always, what in the past hasn't always existed. It was once new in a new
Yep.
experience. And my point is, with the other side of the human mind that naturally would want to seek answers to things, that's a natural human trait. You want to seek answers to matters, and getting an understanding, and where, you know what could be beyond you, knowledge wise and rational wise and understanding, it could be a potential fear. You get what I'm
Absolutely.
saying? And so, like,
I totally understand what you're saying, and I'm trying to add to what you're saying by saying that those thoughts that you're having, that you want to know and understand further, only come from the fact that we don't need to fear for our lives. I'm adding to what you're saying. I'm saying that we absolutely do what you are saying that we do. We do that every day, and we get to communicate those things together and look for solutions. But we're looking for solutions today that we would never try to find beforehand.
You
So
could
we're
you
always
could a person could, well, you could not want to be interested in seeking an answer, and you might want to just lean to what you're more comfortable with, and saying this should remain the same forever, in being, let me
you
finish
could.
please, in where you have a bias towards, and
That's true.
where, like,
Absolutely.
so at one point you could need a horse, but maybe if you're reading the environment well enough, you might need a boat in that particular time,
Hmm.
right? Because you're in a flooding now.
In this
No matter
case,
how biased you are in wanting one thing, you know what I mean, based on the changes of the environment, you would need an other, and that's just natural in evolution, in the process of evolution and adaptation. Either you adapt or you go extinct, right? And the
yeah,
mind is developed to to not to be diverse in thinking, in adapting. The mind is evolution, is a constant state of evolution. It comes up with new ideas and new things 24/7. That's what the so it's kind of like you don't have to evolve physically. Your mind can just
you
constantly
do need to evolve
change.
physically, Nivek. I
Let me
don't
let me
agree with
can, I-
that
let me finish.
statement.
Can I finish, please?
Hmm.
Your mind can constantly rationalize things out in changing in conclusions, in a way in where you can overcome the environment. You can manipulate the environment in order to more likely sustain yourself. You don't have to physically evolve like an animal did in order to adapt to the environment. The adaptation is through the mind overcoming the environment, not necessarily not the body as much, because human beings, they're not as built as tough as a lot of animals out there.
I think you're incorrect, and I'd like to tell you why.
Go ahead.
I think you're incorrect. I think you're correct on certain points.
How
where
how am I incorrect
you are
exactly?
incorrect by saying that the
What part did
mind.
I say made no sense?
It does no. All of a lot of it makes sense, and I understand why you would make that. I think I understand why you would make that. Uh, I understand why how you're coming up with what you're saying.
Okay.
What I would like to point out is that
Yeah.
the mind can't create new ideas without energy. So you do need the physical world in order to create new ideas. You need more and more energy the more ideas you make. You cannot create the amount of ideas that we are creating without more energy. So you need more leisure time. You need more free energy to create more thoughts. You need to be able to sit for longer periods of time and do nothing and think for more longer periods of time. Therefore, you need to be physically, you need to live longer in order to absorb more information from your past and more information through literature or internet or whatever, more information from others in order to absorb more information to be able to write more things and new
Okay. You know
thoughts
what?
for new
Slow down.
people.
Slow down. I'm a little dumb here. You're going over my head. I'm not following like how what I
Okay.
said really.
Well, I want to say that you've expressed the fact that the mind can evolve separately from the physical world.
No, man. I'm saying like how human. I was just stating how human beings are different from animals, and
Oh,
where
but we're not that different.
how I well.
If we were
I
that,
get I understand animals have brain. They're sense of they use their sense too. You know, but I'm saying like it's more based off of their physical build and adapting to their environment than with humans. Human beings, they adapt through innovation of manipulating their environment
but
through their
I agree with you,
minds
Nivek, on this point, and
in
that's exactly the
adaptation.
point where you go wrong. It's that well, you don't go wrong. Sorry,
Okay.
it's not that you go wrong. I'm sorry, I'm using the wrong words here. I don't think you're going wrong with that point. I think you're correct that we go
Yeah,
through
because I'm
innovation.
saying human beings compensate when adapting with their minds.
But
Animals more. I'm not saying animals are completely like they're brainless, but I'm just saying it's more with their bodies is all.
what I'm saying is that if animals would live for longer periods of time because they would find some kind of cognitive jump in the way that they behave, or some kind of realization that, hey, this, or they find if if certain animals that are kept in a zoo, for example, they don't need to care for themselves in the same way that animals that live in the wild. So you could probably give a chimp, you can make a chimp learn a lot more in a zoo than you can
In
make
a
him
zoo.
live. You can make him learn by
That's
himself in the wild.
humans. The zoo's humans.
The zoo is human. The zoo is kept by humans. Sure. What I'm trying to say is that if you waste, not if you waste, if you use more energy to innovate, you will innovate. Like, there's certain jumps in evolution where we get to learn new things that make us
I
become.
think I get what you're saying. You're saying if you innovate a lot, it makes things like things can get harder.
No, easier. As things get easier, we innovate more because we have more time to innovate, because surviving
Yeah.
becomes
Oh, okay,
easier.
okay. Oh, I thought you were gonna go
So
like you're going down the route of we're gonna get so technologically advanced we blow
no, not
ourselves
at
up
all.
type of
I'm
we
trying
blow
to add to
ourselves
your
up with a
discussion, but
nuclear missile type of
not at
conversation.
all.
Okay,
I'm not
okay.
saying
Never
we're
mind
being
then.
destroyed whatsoever. I'm not going there at all. I'm trying to
Ooh,
express the bandwidth of information that we are
okay.
using and how much we have more than animals and how far ahead we are because of this. And I'm
Yeah.
saying that the spiritual debate on who is your God, and the fact that we're trying to describe God, spirituality, and truth, as Jordan Peterson is doing, is a byproduct of how little we suffer in our lives. The less we suffer, the more new issues, innovations, and problems we are trying to solve. And we are so far ahead of the curve that we are currently trying to
How you know we're
describe,
ahead of a
identify,
curve? Maybe
because you
let's
said so.
can I say hypothetically if we would have taken
You're proving
God
my point for me, because you are
out of
able to
it.
make hypothetical suggestions, and which we're able to make these
Okay.
new assumptions. Like you're literally proving that the fact that you're making this podcast proves how far ahead of the evolution curve we
You
are
have
and
to
how
let me
far ahead we
finish
are
when
in
I say
communication.
something.
I do. I do, but at the same time, because I feel like if you go past a certain point of something, I'd like to
Well, I mean, still, just
go for it.
okay. So yeah,
I'm
in
all ears.
relation to animals, yeah, yeah, but like you don't know if things that were done that probably uh when where religion was a factor in it might not have potentially held humanity back, right?
Can you reiterate that, saying that it
Okay.
would not, we don't know
Okay,
that it would
okay.
have held
You're
humanity back?
saying where we are is a lot of progress, but I'm saying, well, it might not be a lot of progress because possibly the things that you're pointing out to as a factor as a benefit might not have been a benefit. Maybe if it wasn't a
Oh,
factor, maybe we would have be
I,
further ahead.
absolutely. I can't tell if it's good or
You
bad.
can't necessarily be sure about that.
Mhm,
Maybe
I
if
can.
those things that you say that were good afterwards, if those things weren't around, we might be in flying cars right now, right? We might be we might be the Jetsons.
The only the only metric that I have for if things are good or bad, the metric that we're using right now, like in the way I'm talking, like I don't know that anyone else made that assumption. The way that I'm speaking right now definitely says that the metric that I'm using to in order to say if it's good or bad is the length of time humans live and the amount of information that you can have and the amount of suffering, pretty much is suffering through your lifetime, because the the amount of time you live is pretty much correlated very, very closely with how happy you are in life and the amount of suffering you have had. Because if you would have suffered less, more, you probably would have been dead a long time ago. So that's the metric we're using. So if you would live longer and have absorbed more information through your lifetime, you would have had, in consequence, in correlation, sorry, less suffering through your life because you would proven you have had less suffering because you have been a lot older and you have had a lot more education, and therefore possibly you would have flying cars. Because you're alluding to flying cars, so I'm using that as an example. So yes, we possibly would have flying cars. Why? Because we would had been we have discovered flying cars because we have lived for a certain amount of time, because we've had a certain amount of population that is educated up to the point that we are living so long and be able to absorb so much information that we are able to use things around us to make flying cars. But in order to get there, we need to minimize suffering and maximize survival. And the more we minimize suffering, and the more we maximize survival, the more innovation there will be, because we can expend more energy, time, and food and energy, global energy, in order to innovate, create new thoughts that we did not have before. In order to have new thoughts, you need to live longer and suffer less.
Robert and Nivek, can I
Okay,
jump in?
I want to make
Uh,
one quick statement that he kept I wasn't able to finish. I kept trying to finish, but I was never able to finish. I just wanted to
go.
talk about like the two mind like when it comes to human beings, how they naturally are. They naturally It's a natural human thing to try to seek answers to things that you don't understand, and it's you venturing out to seek an answer. And the thing about that is, when you venture out into the unknown, you can have a potential fear of the unknown, and sometimes you have an opposite mindset where you don't want to you're not comfortable with the unknown. You rather cling to a bias of what you're more comfortable with because it's more familiar to you. So you want to be told what you believe. That's the norm in your culture. That it is the way. It is what's to believe. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
You you have a mindset where, okay, you want to go and seek answers, but you have a confirmation my bias type of mindset where you just want what you believe to be validated, and you more want to lean to your bias. And then you see that today, where people, they have a viewpoint of underground lizards and all of that type of crazy QAnon stuff, and it's kind of like you have grifters that'll just tell them what they want to hear, in confirmation bias, and then they'll say buy this lizard T-shirt. They make some money and they bank off of it, you know, and they're comfortable in that. They're getting their confirmation bias. They're getting the
You're
validation
totally correct. But
and then you have a person that unknown, they go leaning toward their curiosity. They're leaning to the natural human trait of curiosity, of wanting to is seeking answers and wanting to and wanting to venture forward. And where when you're doing that, you're going to come across different things that can be a potential threat. And I can see the fear in that, and it's kind of like you can see you can see the metaphor of God in that. It's kind of like that new environment that you're coming across. You're to get meaning from it, and if you don't get enough meaning, if you don't get enough understanding, you suffer its wrath. Just like you don't take the meaning of God, you suffer His wrath. You know what I mean? And I think that there's a metaphor when it comes to that, and I think some folks they misinterpret it in the story, and it ended up being taken in in a misunderstood way of how to go about life, right? So you are to get meaning from the environment and come to different conclusions, because the mind there's psychologic because there's psychological evolution and things changing, and old ideas are brought with you, but new ideas are also formed, right? Because those old ideas that you're bringing, they were once new, and nothing takes priority over the other, right? They're both important. Okay, go ahead.
So
well, I
basically,
want
Robert,
exactly. Yeah, but I want Nivek has made good
I'm gonna,
points.
I'm gonna, I'm gonna bring you to the speakers, Robert. There's another person here, but go ahead, Blighty.
Oh,
so basically, what you're saying in regards to all this energy and people having these opportunities, it's basically you're almost talking about like what gave the United States the opportunity to become a superpower.
you're very
Of
low. I
course,
have a
it
hard
went
time
into
hearing you, bloody.
sorry. Of course, the United States was making all these, giving all these opportunities that created different classes, a class of elitists, that ran businesses and educated their children in the best schools, and therefore was able to create some of the best minds,
Oh, you're
intellects,
talking about
inventors.
communism?
No, I'm not talking about communism. I'm talking about capitalism, actually.
Okay,
So
because
when
you're going back to where we were. Okay, cool.
so in allowing that energy, instead of being consumed in the factories or out in the agricultural field, it was allowed to have its own class of education, of specialized education, in order to become the next leaders, government, the political scene, education, and
Uh
all
huh.
that, etc., lawyers and all that. Whereas if it didn't have a class of people working that unfortunately didn't have those advantages, they were poor, they had to go to work, all the children, they only lived so far, didn't go into their 80s or 90s like we do now. Those people were the ones that were left working and toiling, almost like a serfdom, and so this other type of people that were allowed to become the inventors and the educators and intellectuals, that's what made the United States a first world country in that sense. It raised up where other countries unfortunately got stuck with a little bit of inventors, a little bit of the scholarly class, and more blue collar workers. So yeah, when you have these kind of energies, and unfortunately it goes only to one side, it's only going to favor, and it's going to make inequalities, and it's going to leave out other people. But the country
Oh,
does it.
okay. I get where you're coming. I get where you're coming
Yeah,
from. You're
but at the
saying
same
like
time, yeah. But hold on,
I'm
let me
just
finish let me
I'm,
finish real quick my train of thought. But also
okay.
with Robert, I believe what you were alluding to, Nivek, was the inequalities, the evil. Like for example, when one power, kind of like the Catholic Church, didn't want to allow Galileo Galilei to bring out the heliocentric system, which was going to replace the geocentric system. What did they do? They wanted to immediately consider him an anathema, and basically take him to the stake and burn him alive. So what happened? He had to recant, unfortunately. Why? Because the powers that be, in this case, the sacrosanct system of church and state together, of the Catholic Church, didn't permit it. And it wasn't until after the Reformation that those ideas were fully able to be embraced in with more freedom. And even then, the early Protestantism that was coming out, Roman Catholicism, came with some of the
Wasn't the
biases.
Reformation like a bloody religious war?
Not necessarily, not at the beginning. It went into the Protestant Catholic Wars and it became
Uh,
bloody, but it wasn't at the beginning. It was there was a
it
lot of threats, but Luther was kind of protected. He had a protectorate,
it
so it
wasn't
wasn't.
kumbaya.
It no, it was never kumbaya. There was always tensions, and when the kingdoms started split, the kingdoms, the Swedish, I think, not Switzerland, but the Swedish and the Denmark and what became, I think, of Belgium eventually.
Okay.
They started picking up Protestantism, so the kingdoms were split because the Catholic Church had lost a lot of power, and therefore, when it lost a lot of power, it lost a lot of say over the governments. And only the ones that remained faithful, like Spain, Italy, France, were the ones that were able to move with that. Whereas with England, it kept on going back from Catholicism to Protestantism, Catholicism with Bloody Mary to Protestantism, and that one had a bloody ending, and it was horrible. You heard of the term Bloody Mary? That was one of the queen's Bloody Marys. She hated Protestants, so she put them. She used to
Okay.
have them
Okay.
beheaded. So those things. So if it wasn't for those advances, with all that blood, unfortunately, spillage, we wouldn't have the countries that we did that became from coming from Western, what it became Western civilized nation, coming from England and all that. If it wasn't for that situation, unfortunately, there was that
Mm,
blood suffering that had to come. And now, of course, we don't understand it because we don't. I didn't experience that. You didn't experience that. Nobody could ever say, "Oh man, we went through that." No, we could only learn it from history, learn and never become, hopefully, never do the same atrocities. That's the whole point of learning history, not to become evil like that, like Hitler, like what he did, or what the whites did to blacks here in America. Slavery and all that stuff. We learn, or what the Spanish did to the Mexicans and Philippines and the countries that they conquer. We learn not to ever be like that because unfortunately there was a time for that and it shouldn't have been, but the discoveries of worlds, they came in with the wrong mentality. Usually it used to be God, gold, and glory. So they wanted to bring God. Yeah, the way the Catholics brought it was horrible because they forced the indigenous people. They wanted the gold that they found from the indigenous countries, and they wanted to get the glory when they took all the gold back to Spain or France or whatever country. So yeah, there was advancement, but it came at a cost. And
uh,
yeah, there was a serfdom because there were
yeah.
kingdoms and emperors in those countries. But anyway, that's what I just wanted to share with you guys. And go ahead.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Serfdom was kind of capitalism in a way, right? Because they were paying with their labor for the benefit of
Yeah,
the lord.
that was more of capitalism. Now what we have is mercantilism, which is capitalism, but much different compared to then.
Okay. Okay. Because I mean, I think you're addressing like my view of seeing both sides of things, and where I was talking about, well, I don't see one extreme of as good or the other extreme of that one extreme of a communism and one extreme of a monarchy, hierarchy, oppression, and and I guess you're referring to that through capitalism. Um, but anyways, I mean, like with when Western civilized, uh, Western the part with okay, with the Renaissance, you had the Black Plague, and a lot of people there believing that it was God punishment for others in societies who are degenerates, and they're being punished, and everybody is killing everybody to the point where they more leaned away from a worldview of God to a reasoning view of God,
Only to find out that
and
that a lot of
a
those
lot of
plagues.
some of that influences some of the influences that so what was happening with the Renaissance of the modernization of Europe came from Italy, and it was more it was a lot of it got influences from other countries that it engaged with.
Of
It
course, of
was
course.
because I
Well,
mean like so like what was it was people more leaning away from religion and where you saw things more advanced and not
Well, you have to
more
understand that with the Enlightenment came the scientific age. So what they found out about the Black Plague, it wasn't about God. It was actually lack of hygiene. When you have rats running in
Yeah,
your
dead
water,
people in the streets. You
yeah.
got
So
to dig
when they
them up and
started,
bury them.
You know, democracy to a monarch is communism, right? It's absurd to have these others in this view of equality having a say in society who are filth and they're poor and they're inferior, right? It's kind of like that it's
it's like pre-communism, communism, right?
it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, it's kind of like, why would you include that in having a say? But then again, with equality of opportunity, other people having a say, that which was kind of social, right? And
Yeah.
it helped advance society. Why? Because everything around you right now is from the mind of another human being, right? And it's good to investing other human beings. Anyways, let me get heritage here. Let me see. Hold on.
Hi.
Hello,
Yeah. Am I audible?
Herika.
Hirak.
Yes.
It's Heerak. You can call me He-Rak if
Okay.
that's easy to
Hero.
pronounce. It's okay. You want to give me a nickname, that's also fine by me. I have no qualms. But
Okay.
anyway, I called in to just say, I mean, I just wanted to go back to the original question that you had here. It is, who is Jordan Peterson's God? Am I correct?
Yeah, kind of like the metaphorical, or is it the
Mm-hmm.
literal God, or is it himself?
Yeah, I like that last one. Is it himself? But yeah, I think to conceptualize John Peterson's God as a literal God or as a tangible God is I don't think that's the best way to imagine it. I think you run into a lot of problems. I think the best way to conceptualize John Peterson's God is sort of a metaphorical God, and not completely metaphorical, but sort of metaphorical. Um, you pretend. I mean, I think he said this before, but I'm just gonna say it here
I'm
again.
leaning to all the above.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we can get to that. We can get to that. But let me just make my case for the metaphorical God, and then we can
Yes.
move on. So I believe that it's best to conceptualize John Peterson's God as a metaphorical God, because when you have a literal God or a tangible God, right? Like, I mean, you wrote it here yourself that if there is a literal God or if there is a tangible God, then its existence would be self-evident. There would be no debate with regards to who or what God is. But the fact that we're having this debate right now, it pretty much does say that, well, there is some confusion as to what God is. And so far, the evidence for the actual God, the literal God, the God as a tangible being, as a thing that you can touch, as a thing that's going to descend down from the skies and, punish us when, we are committing all sorts of sins, I don't know, adultery, I don't know, fucking our own daughters or whatever. Apologies for the, crass language, but I think it's that's not the kind of God that John Peterson's talking about. I think the kind of God he's talking about is a God that exists, is a God that you pretend it exists. It doesn't actually exist out there, right? When you think or when you
I
conceptualize
hear you. I hear you.
God, yeah, you treat him as you treat an ideal or a value, right? Like,
Yeah,
let's say,
yeah, yeah. It's kind of like
like,
you to take it literal. If you water it down to say
yeah,
it's imaginary, you're not you're, you're,
hmm,
you're taking away the meaning of it, right? So he doesn't want to quite do that, because if you say, well, is it a fake thing? It's like, well, I don't want to do that because you taking away the
yeah,
meaning of God. So it's kind of like I'm pro delusion.
hmm,
In other words, he's not gonna.
yeah,
I think that's what it is. But he doesn't want. I think he. I
okay,
think you should say that. I think if you're pro delusion, it's kind of like saying
hmm,
I'm pro hypnotizing,
But you
right?
wouldn't
And
know
if
that you're
and
delusional.
but no, I'm
right,
not saying. I'm saying if you are
what?
pro hypnotizing, then say you're pro hypnotizing. I don't think there's
Yeah,
anything wrong with that, because some people it's good to hypnotize them. It's kind of like, okay, you have a fear of
hmm,
spiders, boom, you no longer have a fear of spiders. You're hypnotized. Is there
I
anything
see.
wrong with that? No, there's nothing wrong with that. You
I
hypnotize
disagree
a
with that
person.
explanation a little bit, and let me get to the nitty gritties of why that is. Because, well, Imagine tomorrow you have something that you want to achieve. You have certain goals that you've set out for yourself. You tell yourself maybe you want to be an amazing athlete in a sport, or you want to be an amazing scientist in any particular field of science. So what do you do? Like how would you go about being let's say what is it that you like, Nivek, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, like a hobby?
Sorry? A hobby, yeah, any hobby. It could even be a very deep motivation. You don't have to
Okay,
share that with us,
soccer.
of course, but any soccer. Okay, fair
Okay.
enough. So yeah, let's say you want to be an amazing soccer player. I don't know what your favorite team is. Maybe it's Manchester United, maybe it's Chelsea, maybe it's Everton. I don't know. But let's say you want to be an amazing footballer. So tomorrow, if you want to be an amazing footballer, you need to put in all the work and all the legwork that is required to be an amazing footballer, correct?
Yeah.
But you don't always necessarily know what that is, because who the hell knows, right? I mean, let's say you're starting all the way from scratch. You're someone who's never touched a football before, but you've seen what the sport of football is. You kind of have an idea about it, but you've never really been, playing football, quote unquote, professionally. I mean, there's a big difference between playing with your bunch of friends and, playing 7v7s or 8v8s or even 11v11s on the field in a casual setting versus playing it in a professional match for a team, in something like a Champions League. So the way you would go about doing that is that you conceptualize what the ideal footballer is, right? And then you strive towards that ideal. You try and imagine, okay, if I was the best, I don't know, midfielder in the world, what would my morning look like? What would my training routine look like? What would my schedule look like? Correct. So when you try and imagine all of those things, you're sort of creating an ideal. You're sort of creating a picture of who the
Yeah.
ideal midfielder or the striker is. And the question to you now is that ideal real, right? I mean, it's sort of a rhetorical question. Like, I can give you the answer, but you're more than welcome to try and tell me what you truly think, because I think that's going to help us get off to a better understanding of
What
where
the
we both lie in the understanding of that
what the
concept.
ideal midfielder is?
Yeah, yeah, something like that. Like what the ideal midfielder's day looks like. Like, let's say you want to be the midfielder, right? So
I see,
how would
I
you go about
see.
spending your
Like you
days?
eat and you jog in the
Hmm.
morning. So I guess
Yeah.
you're doing rituals, right?
Exactly. You're doing something of the sort that is approximating closer and closer towards the ideal, correct?
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson has
Okay.
been through this. He said himself that the more that you act like a Christian, whether or not you believe you're a Christian, you are a Christian because you are enacting Christianity. So, uh,
Hmm.
no matter what religion you are, if you're enacting that religion or you're enacting a soccer player, to be a
Yeah.
soccer player, you'll become a soccer player. Therefore, and that's the way he sees it. So it doesn't matter what religion, what God, and how you call whatever you are enacting, that religion you are enacting is what you are.
I
Yeah,
agree. I agree. I'm not denying
I
that,
don't
but I think
disagree with
it's
that, but I see
yeah.
two sides to things. I see
Oh,
like it's
okay.
okay to take the past and and bring it in,
Hmm.
with you, but I think that those things that you're taking of the past
No
wasn't
one's
always
disagreeing
the
with you though.
past. It was
I
once the
appreciate the help, Robert, but I don't think 2v1 is very fair. I think you should let me kind of handle this one, and then if you have anything to say, if anything that according
testing.
to you, is causing a misunderstanding between me and him, you can jut in and clarify that real quick. But I think it's not very fair that Nivek has to defend against two people at once. What do you say, Robert?
Huh?
Oh, no, there's no one defending. I think we're backing up the same statements in order that we're making
Oh, I
sure that we
agree. I
understand the
agree.
same thing. I don't believe there's
I
anyone
agree. I agree. We
arguing
are. We are.
against.
Absolutely. No, I have no doubts about that. I believe you're on the same page, but I think it's important to let Nivek,
Yeah, yeah,
understand it.
I'm just talking with Hirika.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I'm not saying I disagree with you.
okay.
Things
So,
could
what's the
be
downside
based
to
off
that?
of perspective in where what you see of the past and
Mhm.
valuing the past that wasn't always the past. At one point, it was the present, and and
Oh, yeah.
it was the current, and they're both important. They're
Oh,
not
absolutely.
just one important, right? It's so.
Sure.
The thing about when people talk about the past, what
Hmm.
is the past? I mean, it's hard to so like we were talking. We're, the past and present and future is
Hmm.
simultaneous if you think about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like,
Because it's almost
it's based on each other, right? Like
based
the
off.
future dictates what you do in the present, and then what happens in the present is a product of the past, and then what happened in the past is also how you look at it from the lens in the present. Like, is that what you're
Yeah,
trying to say? Like, it's all
yeah. And sometimes there are things that you take from the present in being conservative, right? In upholding
Mhm.
cultural norms, but they are different anomalies that happened in the past that would affect that have cause and effect outcomes that will affect one thing, and then it'll affect another, and then it'll affect
Oh yeah.
another, right? And where it will come to develop something new. You
So
get what
it's
I'm
like
saying?
dominoes
Because
is basically what you're saying.
things that happen in the present
Hmm.
are based off of the past. So you could take the past of something that would always happen, but there are things that seldomly happen as well. Because I always think in dual
Okay.
perspective, and
Hmm.
those things that are anomalies that happen, those those things that are anomalies that are rare, that are having cause and effect,
Hmm.
uh, predetermined outcomes,
Hmm.
would create something new. And that thing that is new, you're going to
Okay.
have to adjust to it.
Oh, I agree. I've no problems with that whatsoever. But
So like
yeah.
what's going to happen in the future, you look in the past to see what's going to happen. Yes,
Okay.
but
And the past changes based on where you are in the
they're past
future.
that are constant norms that will
Hmm.
happen in what do you call it, that are of order,
Yep.
but they are rare occurrences that would happen in cause causality
Okay.
outcomes that would create something new as well.
Okay.
In
Fair
where the
enough. I.
past matters and the future matters as well, right? So
Mhm.
we can make logical calculations, and then we can say, shit, a fucking meteorite's gonna come at our way, right? What are
Yeah.
you gonna do about that, right?
Not much.
Animals not gonna do nothing. They're pretty much doing their norm, right? They just
Yeah.
sleep, eat crap, and just human beings. They're
So
gonna have to do a little something differently. They can't do the norm,
right,
right?
right.
They're
So.
gonna have to build a spaceship,
Mhm.
probably see if they could. By the way, this is already done anyway. This is because
Yeah.
I don't know if people saw that already. It was that test that already was successful because they're just testing to see hypothetically if it's possible, if you could deflect if you could nudge an asteroid in a potential
Yeah, yeah,
collision
yeah.
course to Earth, and that test passed.
And they've tried that.
No, they passed. They passed. They tried and they hit
Oh,
the
they passed
meteor.
already. Oh, wow, that's amazing.
So it's like, okay, good, good. You know what I mean? Right now,
Yeah, well,
it's
one
like
less natural
it's
tragedy
not going
to
to
think about.
happen, and they track as much probability outcomes as possible of meteors
Yeah.
coming to hit the planet, and that's a good thing, right? Because we're psychologically evolving because of a result of that. We could potentially not go extinct, right? Unlike other
Yeah.
animals,
Uh,
that undergo drastic changes of of the environment, and not being able to survive. And unlike
so
humans, they got a brain, so they
yeah,
can cover themselves up with a coat. They can figure something out. An animal, it'll die in the fucking cold, right? Or it'll just drown in the water.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if it's not a polar bear or a penguin, the likelihood it's going to die in the Arctic or Antarctica is quite high. So, coming back to the point, right? Like, so I said that the god is a metaphorical god, and to illustrate the example, I told you to imagine, like let's say you want to be a soccer player, you imagine the perfect midfielder, what his morning routine looks like. Now the question that I asked was,
Hmm.
is that midfielder real, quote unquote? That's the answer. And
I'd like to respond to
well,
the soccer player part.
yeah,
Okay,
sure.
so with the soccer player, you do the norm, you get pretty solid, and you mostly
Hmm.
like would beat folks. Guess what happens? You're going
Okay.
to go further and further, and you're not going to be coming across normies. You're going to be
Sure,
coming
sure.
across some champions. You're going to
Absolutely.
be coming
So,
across some certain type of, and you're going to have to, and you're going to have to adapt. You're going to have to
okay.
improvise. You're going to have to do something to win that trophy, because it's
Yeah, no
just not
doubts about that.
the
But
average norm every day is just not going to cut it, and you're going to have to you're going to have an epiphany. You're going to have to rise up to the
yeah,
moment and deal with this
exactly. So,
overburdening challenge of people that are just so hardcore on their defense. Their midfield is unbelievable, and their offense is, it seems,
yeah, I think
unstoppable, right? So the
I
Joe
agree.
Schmo teams the average everyday Joe Schmo teams that you've overcome, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, and you're gonna have to evolve. You and
exactly.
the
So,
norm's not gonna cut it. So I always see two sides to things. I
so
always see
what's the
like a
other
back
side
and
to
a
this?
front, and I see a left and a right. I see it up and a down. And
Right, right. So,
I
what?
think both
Yeah,
I think both sides matter. It's kind of like, let's put it this way. This is why I think this way. It's kind of like,
I
if you
don't
go
disagree with you, Nivek.
let me let me finish. Let
Sure.
me finish. It's kind of like, this is why I think this way. For example, if I put you on a pole and you're biased to leaning to the right on the tightrope, right?
Okay.
You can't necessarily be that way, right? You have to probably make a little compromises on shifting your weight to the left every now and then, no matter how much you detest the left, right? You might have to like make little compromising coordinations, right?
I'm sorry, I'm not
I
sure if I follow that example. Could
Okay,
you?
okay. I'm saying, if I put you on a tightrope, I see
Okay,
opposite sides to everything. You might have a
sure.
bias towards leaning to the right,
Towards one side?
right?
Oh, okay, yeah.
But
Yeah, I see.
that could be a potential problem when you're going through wind, rain, you know what I mean, bees and everything like that. You're probably going to have to, whether you don't like it, shift your little weight every now and then and counterbalancing to the left, right?
Sure.
So that's how come, like, in this conversation, I kind of I try to I always I just see scales in things,
Hmm.
and whenever somebody talks and and there's a one perspective, I always try to get a balance.
Oh, I agree. I believe that perspective exists in that example
Uh-huh.
too, right? Because let's say as a soccer player, you're evolving and you're getting better. Not only are you getting better, but at the same time, your ideal conception of what a good midfielder or what a good soccer player is also evolving. Maybe previously you're just responsible for trying to make sure that the offense is on point. Maybe you're just trying to pass the ball, make sure the striker hits a great goal, and you guys
Yeah.
celebrate and you guys knock about. But then maybe your responsibilities start to change a little. Maybe you start to notice, well, that okay, a couple of times it seems like these enemy teams have gotten very used to our offense and they're coming up with these counter strategies. So I need to sort of get better at defense and make sure that they're not just able to get slip the ball past me and get it to the other side where my goalkeeper is going to have to make some weird predictions as to whether the ball is going to go left or right and make that dive sort of preemptively and not put him in that spot. So your conception of what the ideal midfielder is also evolving. So going by that perspective, I think this idea that the God is metaphorical and not real encompasses that perfectly because you've got that scale that you mentioned earlier where it's like, on a scale, like if you go far enough, you travel to, I'm not sure if you've heard of that bizarre statement. It's I I don't know how to quite
Mm-hmm.
put it properly, but the crux of the but the crux of that statement was this: in a time frame that is big enough, there will be a bunch of monkeys who randomly type on a typewriter, and the result of that's going to be some Shakespearean book. Maybe it's going to be Merchant of Venice or As You Like It or Romeo and Juliet or something. But the idea is that as long as you keep going on that continuum, your
Yeah.
ideas of what the ideal is also evolve, and your ideas of what the past was and what that was also evolve. So I think the utility that
Yeah,
it
I see things
provides.
through relativity, and things change in time. And can
Yeah,
I say
sorry.
one thing real quick?
Sure, sure.
So I'll be more specific. I see things in relativity, and things change in time, and that change would be based off the environment where you'd have randomness, shit
Hmm.
happen. You know what I'm saying? That's just
Yeah,
natural. That's how animal. That's how 99%, 99.9 animals go
oh
extinct
yeah.
eventually. You know,
Just shit
shit
happens.
happens and it's gonna happen. You know,
Yeah.
you can conform whether you like it or not. There's gonna be a change, and the thing about that is, it's about you adapting to that change. I believe yes, conformity can be good, and the thing about it is, it's kind of like
Let me just say
I gotta
something very small
finish.
right there. I'm not
I
talking about conformity. I'm not talking about
you,
conformity. I'm not talking
let,
about
let,
that at all.
okay, let me finish. I'm telling you about
Okay.
myself.
Sure, sure.
So I'm thinking like conformity can be good, but based off of the changes in the environment, um, you're you're going to have to make changes yourself away from the
Mm-hmm.
conformity to the changes that are new in the environment in
Yeah.
adapting. Yes, what happened in the past happened, but I mean, there could be you what was mostly the norm in conformity wasn't always the case. You know what I mean? You could have changes in the environment of what
Mm-hmm.
was was once seen as an anomaly, was once seen, you know, as something that was random, now becomes a norm,
Oh
and
yeah.
you're going to have to conform to that norm now in adaptation. So once was what was was a beach, it was a desert, and what was once where it was lush forests. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now it's like it's barren, and with 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 those norms
Mm-hmm.
that you go by, that a person go by, that was beneficial. The process of evolution and adaptation is a real thing.
Yeah.
Either
I
you
agree.
adapt or you go extinct
I
in a
agree. I
change,
agree.
and changes are always constant, and you have
Mm-hmm.
constant evolution in regards to human beings. It's of the mind. They can take in different forms of information, put it together, and come to different conclusions that mimics evolution, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
like you're going to go about this way instead of that way. That is mental evolution, right? So you're manipulating the environment and changing that to adapt. In unlike an animal, it adapts to genetic mutation changes over time. A human being could adapt very quick, much more quicker that way, because it can just put on a spacesuit, right? Or it can put on a beehive or beekeeper suit,
Yeah.
or a scuba gear suit, or you get what I'm saying?
Anything. Yeah. Anything that helps you survive that.
Yeah. So it's it
But you
yeah, the
kind of want
human.
to ensure that the people who come after you also survive, right? So perhaps that scuba suit or that beehive that you're talking about is not the best idea. I mean, maybe that's what I'm not trying to put word into
When I'm talking
Peterson's
about
mouth or
norms, I'm talking
whatever.
about people that talk about passing down norms, and
Yeah,
so
yeah. I'm
I'm saying how norms, they don't always remain the same, and you
I
have
agree.
a
I think
process of
so.
evolution and adaptation, and where you have to adapt to the changes that, you know, most of the times they could be constant, but over time they could uh they could change, you know. And it's like, well, you know, things always happen in the past, but I mean, yeah, yeah, I'm sure everything has already happened, right? I mean, no matter how far you go back, you know,
Yeah,
probably, you know, but in relative to now, it's pretty much new.
I agree. I think we have a very interesting message here by Peter Box. He's saying that Peterson only ever talks about the Christian gods and
Is
not
this on
about the Hindu
YouTube
gods.
or
No,
the
it's on our
Colin?
live chat right now. It's on our live chat in
Oh,
in the Colin app.
okay, go ahead,
Yeah.
read it.
So
What was it?
yeah, it's a question about why John Peterson only looks at things from the Christian lens. I think the idea. So yeah, like I think Richard is right. So Richard's messages came across. So I can tell you this because I'm a Hindu myself, right? So I mean, or at least I was for the longest time until some personal tragedy befell me, and we just haven't celebrated since. Don't want to get into much detail about that, but the thing is that the basic substructure of mythological text, be it the Bhagavad Gita, which is, I mean, it's the description of a battle between a guy named Arjuna, his brothers, the Pandavas, and his cousins basically, and why it's his responsibility to fight them and whatnot, and maybe something like the Bible, and all of these religious texts. Like what I I I can say that as someone who sort of read both, that the basic substructure of all of these texts is sort of similar. I mean, the way they arrive at the conclusions is different. The methods of arriving at those conclusions are different for Hinduism. It's maybe a little bit different for some other religions, but at least I see some parallels between Hinduism and Christianity that make me believe that he's onto something here.
Oh, are you
I
into
don't believe that.
Hinduism?
I'm a Hindu myself. I'm actually all the way from India. I'm in Noida right now, which is close to Delhi. I'm not sure if you've heard about this country before, but yeah,
Yeah, I heard of
I'm
India.
yeah. So I'm
Hiraka,
yeah. Yes, yes, Mr. Blatty.
my friend,
And I
let me tell you something.
sure.
The cuisine of the Indian people, I believe it's heavenly food.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I love it.
Believe it. It's a special place in my heart. And this is coming from a Mexican American. I got
Oh,
introduced to
dude.
it in '97 by my friend who's Punjabi.
Uh-huh.
Karan, that's his name. Karan. I live over here
Yes,
in
yes, yes.
Southern California, and I have not. That is the restaurant for me. Compared to other places, that is the restaurant. And so I tell him, I go. I don't even put my food up there for my culture. I go, but you
Mhm.
guys make a food that is so delicious. Oh my god. I go, it's got to be from
Yeah,
heaven,
well,
honestly.
well,
I
not
just
gonna
wanted to
lie,
share that.
Taco Bell just opened up where I am as well, and I just fucking loved Taco Bell the first time I had it. I've had a burrito for the first time in my life from Taco Bell, and I absolutely loved it. So I think there's a lot of similarities between Mexican and Indian culture, and even my sister, who's living in Europe right now, told me that there's so much similarity between Indian and Mexican cultures. Like it's insane, like the way you guys
Man,
spice your food and everything. Like so, cheers, man. I'm really glad you
thank
like
you,
that
brother.
food.
Thank you, man. I'm gonna let you guys go. You guys have a great night, okay? Take
Okay,
Okay, thank
take
you,
care.
Maddie. But yeah, as I was coming back to the point, I think yeah. So I think there's some real utility in assuming that the God exists in a metaphorical sense because it provides you not only an ideal that you can strive towards in the present, or
Mm-hmm.
that an ideal that was strived towards in the past, but also that an ideal that can be strived towards with the future. Now, I absolutely agree that there are lots of horrible things that have been done in the name of
And you
religion.
don't take it
I'm not going to
literally,
deny
right?
that.
Like you would a story.
Oh no, absolutely not. You take it as literally like you take Aesop's fables. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I apologize for butchered that completely. But
But I mean,
there's a
like, there's a
guy.
difference between a metaphor story and a metaphor all-powerful being that you better follow,
Yes.
or we'll kill you, and
Yeah.
you go to hell, and I gotta chop your head
I
off,
think
type
that.
of.
Yeah, I think the metaphorical being that John Peterson is talking about is essentially his conceptualization of nature, right? Like it's ever evolving because you think about it as we human beings evolve, our problems also evolve. We came from not you go back to 100 years, we'd have problems feeding everyone on the planet. Now, of course, there are still places in India, in so many other countries around the world, in Africa, and maybe in some countries of South America, that people simply just don't have enough food to eat. But we've solved so much of that right now that approximately a good chunk of the population does not go to bed hungry each night. There's still a couple of billion people left that we need to fix, but as soon as we fix it, I think we're going to be making great headway into the utility of religion and whatnot.
I kind of see two opposing metaphors, viewpoints. I
Hmm.
think there's a metaphor in a conservative way, in where you take it literal, like in a deep,
Yes,
very
and I think
serious
that's
way,
wrong.
and there's a metaphor in the artistic way, where it's just more about free expression and liberal, and having liberal free thought, and you know what I mean, and
I agree.
you
I,
being more open to different, and I think the conservative way is about
mhm.
maintaining this structure no matter what, because this is what made us survive, and
Yeah,
it should be upheld. And the thing
exactly.
about it
And
is, it could be
it should also
misinterpreted.
evolve with time.
It could be misinterpreted in a way where that might not what the story meant. The story might have meant like, God
The
is
context is
of the
simply lacking, right?
unknown
Because yeah,
is God is a metaphor the unknown that you trying to get an understanding for. God is a metaphor for the unknown. God is a metaphor for the environment that you need to
yeah,
understand and get meaning from in order to survive. And the story is telling you how to go about doing that in order to survive.
exactly.
It's
But
not telling
the
you to
story
be
also
very
needs to,
literal. It's more telling
yeah,
you, hey, this is here's a process that you can take, and you can change it up if you want to. But I think people, they got lost in the metaphor and they took it too fucking literal. And it's like, okay, no, this is a powerful being that says it's to this be done this way. And it's there's a so you it'll be a difference in where you want to uphold that
yeah.
indefinitely in an absolute way, and where
I have
if
an
it was a
explanation for
story
why
you
that
could
might have
be more
happened.
flexible.
Yeah, I think I have an explanation for that might have happened, right? So going back to my own culture in Hinduism, and maybe there's some parallels to be drawn in Christianity as well. There was only a certain sect of people that were allowed to read the religious text. There are lots of religious texts in India, in Hinduism, in
A lot of
Christianity.
influences came from India, from Asia,
Oh yeah.
that inspired the West, that led
I mean, no
to
wonder, they
different
were coming
different
to our
changes. But
countries for all
the
those
thing about
spices
it
and
is, it's
whatnot.
kind of like folks say it's just due to thanks of Western, um, Western culture, when a lot of Western culture was influenced by other cultures as well.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is like with the culture with religion was more trying to keep things in the past, and have them stay the
Mhm.
way they are. And it's just that
Yeah. And
that's how
I
come I was
think,
mentioning the Black Plague, where society was suffering so harsh, and it was
yeah.
praying, people were praying to God for mercy, and they were just dying. And that bent people, that leaned people away from the religious world view of more being conservative,
And I
upholding cultural norms, and being more,
think about it like this, right? Let's say you're a member of the church, or you're a member of the Brahmin caste in Hinduism, which is the highest caste there is. I mean, in the
oh,
caste system that we
I'm not too
have.
familiar with the Indian.
I'll give you a brief rundown. So we basically had four castes, and the caste was a clear hierarchy. There was one caste at the top, there was one caste at the bottom. The ones at the top were called Brahmins. These were the religious folks, the priests, the pundits, and all those people who did all those religious rituals and whatnot. And there were certain rules and regulations around what the ideal Hindu state should be like, although that just went down the drain, and that sort of changed. But the reason why that happened, and I'm sure in Christianity as well, there were certain sects, so I mean, at least certain hierarchies. I wouldn't call it as bad or as brutal or maybe even as realistic or as well defined as the caste system, but
I heard the
I
British
imagine there was some
exploited the
amount.
Indian hierarchy.
Oh, they did. I mean, that's like colonialism 101, right? Like, you want to go, you want to rule a place, what do? You just take the people, you create some sort of divide against them, you tell them, hey, this guy, he's conspiring against you. And
And you
yeah,
turn
so
it
that's
into
what
a
the British
vassal
did.
state,
Yeah, we learned about
and
that in
you
our
take the
history and how they
resources.
did that. Exactly. So the way they do that is just by turning the princely states against each other by saying, "Hey, I think you deserve much more. That guy right there, he's pretty weak. We'll sell you guns. You go out there, you go have a war with him, and go ahead and try and conquer his land. We got your back, by the way. In the meantime, while you're running that, we'll
So
take care of your
everybody's
empire."
like killing each other. It's this vicious divide and conquer.
Oh yeah, pretty much. That's
So
that's
when
that's
everybody
that's
so
the
when
reality
everybody
of that.
knock each other out, it's like then you just go in.
Yeah. So when you think about India, right? Like, think about India as
India
I
is a
mean, I'm
very
not
wealthy country.
it I, sort of, yeah, I'd say that.
I don't mean
Yeah, no,
literally
no, no.
right now.
Yeah,
I'm
no, no.
talking about in
Yeah, I agree. I
potential.
agree. Yes, yes.
I don't mean that type of wealth. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
shame that they you get what I'm saying. It's
yeah.
like there's wealth there, but
Oh, yeah.
it's not
Absolutely. There's
wealthy.
a lot of wealth here in our country. In fact,
It's like it's
I
wealthy
think
but not wealthy. I don't know. I can't quite
no, it
explain.
is wealthy in the sense that our natural resources are available. We've got the
That's where I'm
perfect.
trying to get. That's where I'm coming
Yeah, yeah.
from.
Like, geographically as well, like, we can grow pretty much whatever the heck we want. We can get spices, we can get wheat, we can get rice, whatever we want, we can grow. The only issue is right now is the same issue that's been plaguing my country, and I think not only my country but also pretty much the world since the dawn of time. It is I'm not sure. There's a statement, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I think that's the case with the people who've been in these positions of power. It's that, when these people
Can
were
I
in those positions,
can
the
I say one
Brahmins, the
thing?
priestly class. Sure.
Referring to the divide and conquer with
Hmm.
British colonialism and having it be a vassal state, you had people who are put into power, into
Hmm.
positions, into prestigious positions of power, and a lot of
Hmm.
that past, it's never left, and it's kind of like been passed
Uh,
down. So
yeah.
there's kind of like a class system that
Oh, yeah.
is there. And the thing about that is when you have that's how come I was using that's why I was talking about monarchism. I was saying, like, if people who wanted to uphold that system in the past, they would have
Hmm.
held society back because people would still be on horseback because people would be against change. And you know you see
It's
change
not
as a
just
you
that.
see the change is a potential threat against, like, if you're wealthy and you're sitting on a pile of gold, why the fuck would you want
Yes,
change?
exactly.
Why would you want
Yeah.
change? It's like, what, you crazy? Like,
And that's the
no.
case with the priestly class as well. Like, think about it, right? Like, so in the priestly
But then
class,
again, like, if you don't want to change, like, you should want change in society, because the
yeah,
knowledge that comes from people's minds is what enriches you as well. But some people can't see past the pile of gold.
yeah, I agree. And I think that's
That was
because
the argument of liberal humanism. Liberal humanism wasn't really about giving a fuck about people. It's kind of like, what? Like, if you cared about people, it'd actually make your life better, because people come up with new creativity. They produce. They come up with new innovations.
yeah,
That could really enrich your life if you think
yeah,
that way, instead of just thinking about superficial things of gold, because I mean that's supposed to represent something, right? That's how come liberal
mhm,
humanism. That's what it actually represents. That's so much more, and the potential of another human being is so much more, and that's
I
and
agree.
it's kind of like, you know
Yeah,
some folks, they don't get that. They have this all about me, take out
attitude.
everybody, capitalist type of, and I'm not like,
A very individualistic
I'm not
attitude,
anti
as Buddhists, yeah.
I'm not anti-capitalist. I just don't
Sure.
see I don't like when you talk about a person that's capitalist, they talk about the individual, but
Mhm.
I don't see the individual separate from the group. I see them as a yin yang thing. You know what I mean? The group creates the individual, and and the individual is, they're not separate from the group.
Oh, yeah.
They both help each
It's
other.
symbiotic. They both benefit from the relationship.
Yeah, and it's a cycle, and you'd
Mhm.
have, if you have a change in the environment that's different, you have somebody within that group of people who's unique, more capable in adapting, who might come up with a new idea to the changes. They would move,
Okay.
they'll become the individual now, right? So caring
Oh, yeah.
about the group is caring about the individual, because the individual is not separate from the group. And I don't, and
Absolutely.
so I never, and so I always try to, like, think balance with between things. I'm not far
Yeah. Don't
far
worry
left
about that.
communist, and I'm not far right. It's more, I try to find the center. And
Yeah.
I think those things, they're both mutually complementing. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you invest, I think like, like, invest. I think, like, looking out for folks isn't like just wasting
Yeah, I
your
agree. I think,
resources or time. I see that as an investment.
yeah,
Things could
it
be
absolutely
subject.
is.
I think things could be subjective, in where it's not either or. You're helping an individual by investing in the group, because people within the group create strong individuals. They'll compete against each other. You know what I mean? And you have, you yourself, investing in quality of opportunity and upward mobility, in where
Mhm.
people, their unique traits, their unique potential, they can strive and move upward,
Yeah.
in a beneficial way to society,
I agree.
in where it's
Can I
very
just go back
much.
and make my point though, real
Yeah,
quick?
go
So
ahead.
I think I'll be done after that. So yes, the point that I was trying to make is that these priestly classes that existed that said, oh, only we and we alone can interpret and read these religious texts. Be it Hinduism, be it Christianity, be it Islam, be it Judaism, be it. I'm really sorry if I got that wrong. I don't know if it's Judaism or if it's that's the correct way to pronounce. I apologize if I've offended any sentiments with regards to that, but. Yeah, as I was trying to say, I think I personally do not believe that it that the people who wrote these texts did with the intention of enslaving a population. I think the over the course of time, sure, the people who came and the proper amendments that had to be made, those people or those systems rather got corrupted, and they were like, okay, well, how can we make this as self-serving as possible, preserve our position in the hierarchy, and doing the least, putting the least amount of effort to try and convince everyone that hey, whatever we're doing and whatever amends you're making, it's for the greater good. I think somewhere along the line in religion, we lost our way and we lost sight of what religion was made for in the first place, which is what I think Peterson really hits home about. I think it's about having those large metaphorical stories as a way of understanding and viewing the world. And some of that information is so primal and so primitive and so true that you could go back or you could go ahead in 1,000 years, in 1,500 years, let's say, and that piece of information could still be useful and still be relevant and still be applied. Is that to say that there are parts of Hinduism which are not completely
But you
stupid
got
and
to be
abhorrent?
careful
Like
in taking the metaphor too seriously.
exactly, exactly.
In bringing what's
No, but
mythological
what I'm
in reality, and having it affect reality.
what I'm trying to say is that that metaphor itself is what got corrupted over the course of time. I'm not saying that the metaphor got taken too far. I think the metaphor was
You think it
corrupted and
was
surrounded
deliberately corrupted, or just
Yes,
did it
I
happen to
thought
be
that
that
the
way?
religious text got corrupted. I don't think that any person in their right mind, would sit down and write a long codicil on how to, on how he could go about enslaving people. And
Well,
I
you
don't
don't
believe
think
that's
that
how religion came
people
about.
who use religion
Hitler did exactly that.
just for their selfish means,
No, I
you
believe
think they're
people
all
do that. I'm
genuine?
not
You think
denying
all
that
the people
people
that
do
do
that.
that are
Yes.
genuine?
No, absolutely not. God, that's not what I'm insinuating at all. What I'm trying to say
Uh,
instead is that the people who use these religious texts in that way are the kind of people who would purposefully misinterpret something that is said, derive a meaning that does not exist, and draw an implication that the author did not intend to be drawn, right? Like, but one of the great things about art, and sometimes also the downside of it, is the fact that people get out of it what they want. When an artist makes a painting, I don't know, when Jackson Pollock or whoever these Georgia O'Keeffe, whoever, I don't know much about painters. Those are the
do you
only
think
two that come
JP
to my mind.
grifts?
Sorry.
You think he grifts? Like, tell people what they want
Gri-
to hear.
Yes, exactly. I think it's sort of what people get out of art as well, right? So you sort of perspective sort of skews that, and that's the fundamental
Art, you
problem
know
with
it's
art to an
art.
extent.
If I told you
Art,
there's
yes.
such thing as fairies that shoot laser beams out of their eyes, and everybody else that tells you otherwise, they don't know what the hell they're
Oh
talking
yeah, I
about.
agree.
There's a big
Look, I
difference
believe
there.
that there are some. I'm not saying that those things weren't taken too far. I
I
agree.
don't
There
leave
were
a
things that were
movie
taken too
saying
far.
fairies are shooting laser beams out of
Yeah,
our eyes.
but
It's all a
I'm trying to say
conspiracy.
that the people who wrote that were not trying to help people, but instead were trying to preserve their position in the hierarchy. And the way they did that was by instilling this sort of fear that, hey, if you don't listen to what we say, maybe there's a mystical God who's going to descend down from the skies. And
That makes sense. I mean, that keeps. I mean, yeah,
exactly,
because it's like, hey, I talk to God, so He says this. It's not that I'm saying it. No,
yeah, he's saying it.
trust me, it's God saying it. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's God saying it, guys.
He
And
told you to scrub my boots and wash my laundry. Hell, give me your money too. Give me your wife and
yeah, exactly.
your house.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that's what happened. I believe that's sort of what happened with religion, and that's just what I wanted to end my discussion and end my argument. That I don't believe that the people who sat down and wrote religion did it with the intention of, um, you know, I'd say did it with the intention of enslaving the entire human population. I don't think that was. I think that would require you to be tyrannical, and to an extent that is going to be hard to sort of comprehend in one lifetime. I think you need to breed that sort of evil over multiple generations to truly enslave a population. I don't think it's possible to do
If
it
you're
so
closer to
quickly.
God and God speaks to you and people have to listen to you, doesn't that in a
Exactly,
way make you
exactly. And
God?
hey, that's Yeah, that's all
doesn't
I
that
wanted to
kind of in a
plant.
way make you God? Isn't that tempting?
Yeah, exactly, and that's sort of the seed that I wanted to plant. People sort of took religion, and the people who were tasked with protecting religion and making sure that it actually comes out and says what it was supposed to say the entire time, which is, hey, these things are metaphorical truths. You can go and act it out in the world, and they'll exist. People mix that in with some very bullshit commandments about how you should wife. Like how I don't know, like I don't know what bullshit religious commandments were, but one in Hinduism, for example, was that these people are untouchables, and you shouldn't go out there and touch them, and you shouldn't go out there and communicate with them, and that they don't deserve the most basic of human. I mean, they don't deserve the most basic of human need fulfillment. I mean, they don't deserve to have their needs fulfilled as human beings, because they're lesser by some birth or by some random tragedy. But that is not to say that the rest of the text does not have value. That's all I'm trying to say. That there were parts of it that were good. Clearly, there are some metaphorical truths in there that I think we've discarded, and that has cost us heavily, which I think is what Nietzsche was trying to say as well. But at the same time, that same religion was also corrupted by those people tasked with making sure that it evolved in the right way, and that it constantly updated its story, right? Because the story also needs to be updated as we move on with time, because those pieces of learning might not be as relevant anymore. Those people were the ones who were so out of touch with reality and so concerned with keeping their own power that they just it just metamorphosized into something absolutely hideous, like a tumor. And yeah, that's all I really have to say. And I would also like to end my sort of argument by saying that I'm not the kind of person who's religious. I'm in fact, I've like I said earlier, I've stopped all sorts of religious rituals and celebrations, but I do think there is some real utility in religion,
Hmm.
and some of that has been tarnished by people who wanted
You
to serve
think
their own
there's a
interests.
utility in taking it literal or metaphorical?
Is there utility? No, there is utility in understanding it from a metaphorical sense. And there is utility. I mean, not all of that is literal. Like there are parts of it that are literal, but I don't think all of it is literal. That's what I'm trying to say. That's all. Like it's not all of it is metaphorical truth entirely.
I
So yeah,
see. It's
that's
like a metaphorical truth to get an understanding.
yes, it's a metaphorical truth that you have to understand, and it holds true, in multiple places. Like you could apply it today, you
Because
could apply it
I
tomorrow.
always
It still
thought
holds
God
true.
represent like trying to get an understanding
Absolutely.
of reality, and where like when people say they get meaning of God, it's kind of like, well, you get meaning of the environment around you, that you have to get an
It is that.
understanding in order to approach it, and
It is that. And
God is a
yeah, like I said
metaphor
earlier, it also
of
evolves
that.
with time.
Yeah.
Like the idea of God also evolves with time. So that's where we went wrong. Like we sort of the people who were in power of trying to make sure that that evolution of God came about correctly, but they just sort of went haywire. I mean, maybe I'm completely wrong about this, but
I'm
hey, this might
I'm
make
gonna
sense.
invite you to speaker. I'm gonna get the next caller.
Thank you.
Hello, Vivek.
Hi. Hi. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, so I would disagree with your idea of Jordan Peterson's God, actually. Uh, for, if I'm correct, you interpreted it in a way that
Well,
God
it's hard to
can.
interpret what Jordan Peterson is saying, isn't it?
Yeah. No,
I'm
I
kind
think
of
I have the.
struggling.
I think I almost have the right idea of what he means by God, in the sense, for example, God exists in a metaphysical reality. The way I interpret it, it's like the color red or color blue. It doesn't really exist in the way you know it, but it exists in your head as a result of some natural phenomena like waves bouncing off from a
It could be
surface.
subjective, is where you're getting.
No, not really.
Okay.
I'm trying to say that it's an objective metaphysical reality. So, like how the color red or blue exists inside your head as a result of a natural phenomena, the idea of God and these religious stories are sort of humans looking back at their psyche as a result of evolution and the environment we are living in, like you said. So I think it is a metaphysical reality of God, and it punishes you when you do when you go against some of these commandments.
Can I tell you what my view is kind of with him? I kind of see that he sees the being useful in being a metaphor, but also in it being taken literally as well, and where he does see it as a metaphor. But if you have a strong belief in that metaphor, that is a good, which is seen as a good metaphor, then that can be good as well. Is where
Yeah,
I'm leaning to
yeah,
in
right.
his views. So it's kind of like when people talk about like believe in God. I think it's kind of like there's like, do you believe in God? I think it's like he's thinking like, you want me to lean away from people strongly believing in God, in a metaphor that could be something good, because there are things that were good in metaphors
Yeah,
that
but
help society get by, and you know what I mean. It was a strong delusional belief or not, it still was a good thing.
yeah,
So I can't speak out against that.
yeah, Nivek, I almost understand your view, and I almost agree with it. But my only issue with that is, it's
So you
not
think he
just
believes then?
who.
Peterson.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely. Peterson
Oh,
believes
okay.
in a God. Yeah, and
I
it's
didn't I
not just.
didn't know.
I mean,
Sound like
yeah,
he's it does sound like he doesn't really hold. He's not really firm on his stance. It's not, some people say he doesn't, and he's coming closer to. But you're saying he's there.
yeah, but in a different way. Like he sees spirituality the way I do. It's a
Oh,
right.
I see. I see. It's not like he believes in like a little god. It's kind of like
Oh
he's
yeah,
more
no,
pro. He's more spirituality.
yeah, yeah, not an objective God, but God exists in a metaphysical plane kind of thing. Like I
Spirituality
like
still
one of
sounds
his
kind of religiously to me.
right, but I like one of his quotes about the God of the Old Testament,
What's
in
the
which he
difference
said
between
that
being religious and spiritual?
I think being religious is like believing in an objective God, and
Okay.
oh wait, I didn't mean spiritual in the way that there is an objective heaven or an objective moral good, but as I think he believes that God came about because of a reality that existed on Earth, and
Okay.
humans constructed a God, but he is definitely real in a metaphysical sense.
So
Like
you're
he
saying he's leaning towards like he's saying like people who think to their gut is not necessarily a bad thing, because I see him make I see arguments being made against
yeah,
science,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's kind of like, hey, you can't always be factual and logical. It's not always about that, and you're saying what that thing that he's talking about is spirituality.
yeah, I think so. I think he means a metaphysical God,
So what is
not an
spirituality? I mean, like, how can I know what it is and when it isn't something?
right. So I would say there are two types of spiritualities in the spiritual realm itself. For example, ones that believe in an objective God and objective transcendental human spirit.
If I said fairies and unicorns, would that be spirituality? Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, of a form of spirituality. But there's a difference between fairies and Santa Claus and a God which dictates you what to do. And I
Okay.
think the yeah, and I think the God
I
is
didn't know that there's a difference.
yeah, yeah, no, there is definitely. I think a God is sort of the construction of uh, yeah, Jordan Peterson. One of his quotes was that or constructions of I mean an projection of the human hero archetype, sort of in a way. So God is reality in a sense that it's a reflection of the way humans perceive the nature, and I think that is Jordan Peterson's real position on God. No, no, I don't think he means it like in an objective sense. He definitely believes that human life is more valuable than just an accident or something like that. So not a nihilistic, not a nihilistic position, but he definitely believes that God is this personification of the way humans perceive nature, and then they punish you in different ways. It's just like how nature punishes you in different ways. And yeah, I think that is his real position, not a metaphorical but a metaphysical one.
If you have change that you don't like, you can say God is against that change in going towards your bias belief.
That's the, that's the institutions that do that, not the pure
Because
God.
you want to, you could potentially want to hold a viewpoint regardless of whatever fact is before you potentially.
Yeah, institutions do that. I don't think
So
the
like with
pure idea of
spirituality with
God
the
will do that.
unicorns, um,
Right.
a person that might want to like have a strong bias to believing in unicorns, you know.
Believing in an object, a unicorn doesn't stand for anything. It's a mythical, but God stands for uh, this law of nature or human perception of law of nature.
Well, maybe not. Might be coming from the person's mind,
Might
and
be coming from a person's mind. I
yeah,
mean,
not really from God.
all the command, well, all the commandments, even the Old Testaments one actually makes sense in a way. uh, for example, the one that, okay, the curling of sexual freedom in old Judea. So that actually made sense if you look back at that time, and God did punish people who were frivolous in the form of sexual diseases and unwanted pregnancies and all these things. So it made sense that nature punishes you for that act, and so there is a law that says you have to curl up your uh, sexual desires and your intentions. Obviously, the God has changed now. That's because of the contraceptions and things like that. But the basic concept remains the same, that it is sort of a metaphysical, it is a reflection of the laws of nature. They give you they reward you, they punish you for these acts, and there are these things you need to watch out for. Yeah, one of these quotes of Jordan Peterson that I was talking about, the God of the Old Testament.
Yeah.
People like to think that God of the Old Testament was a tyrant, and Jordan Peterson said that's not the correct way to look at the God of the Old Testament. God of the Old Testament was more like, you better watch out. It's a, it's a dangerous environment. You better watch out. Things can go wrong, and it was a reflection of that reality of the part of nature.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's
Yeah, so it's not an objective one, but a metaphysical truth. That's all I wanted to, I mean, change a point of.
yeah. Um, I get what you're saying. It's like it God is like it represents he represents how things should be, right?
Yeah, and that's why God of the Old Testament was tyrannical, because life in ancient Judea was tyrannical, and like he said, better watch out about the uh, e- environment.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
things change over
that's all I
time,
got to say.
and you could have like a person's interpretation of what something is it, in it could be of a bias, You know what I mean? And a lot of times, like if like with the unicorns, let's say I had a dream about unicorns, but I want to believe that they're real, and now I want to conduct my life off of believing unicorns. You know, a person would want a confirmation bias that their belief in unicorns is real and it's a good thing. But to take something that is of a delusion and to have that affect reality, I don't think is a good thing. Now, if you want to take it in a metaphorical way, like in an artistic way, where you can get like a meaning from a story, yes. But if you take what you watch literally at the movie theater, right, and then you start like believing in fairy demons and you got to do what they say, and you start like killing people at the movie theater and taking that movie you just watched literally, that's not a good thing. Sometimes it's good to separate delusion from reality. Sometimes it's good to have it align with reality and as it being a metaphor. But the thing about it, some sometimes it's sometimes a metaphor can be good, that is mythological, and sometimes it could potentially be bad in how you're taking something that is fictional and having it affect reality. Sometimes you should separate the two things and not lump them in as one, because that's corrupting. You're having something that's not true dictate the outcome in reality. That could be dangerous. You don't wanna be going by delusion when it comes to the reality that you're in. I guess but I guess like sometimes it could be like maybe like a person can't have answers to things that are beyond them, and it's like, you know what, I'll just say, okay, there's a God, and I'll just get meaning from God. So any type of explanation I want from things, I'll just say got it from God, and that'll make me that I'll get comfort in that, in where I don't have to fear what I don't understand, because I got my understanding from getting meaning from God. It's kind of like Santa Claus. It's kind of like, you don't want to feel like you know it's, or the Tooth Fairy too, yeah. You don't want to feel like you're not gonna get like a gift or anything like that, or you don't have. I guess that's, it is kind of the Tooth Fairy. It's like I don't want to feel like you don't want the you want the kid to be feel comfortable in thinking that mythological being is looking out for them, and they get solace in that, and where you tell them that there's such thing as Santa Claus and there's such thing as a Tooth Fairy. I don't know how that's that much. I guess there could be good in that. There's nothing wrong with that. But after a while, you should not take it literal. And that's the thing. Sometimes things are taken literal in a way. Oh, crap. Okay. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Johnny.
Hey, hello, Nivek.
Hi.
Thanks for taking my call. I was wondering if you got a chance to listen to that debate between R.C. Sproul and Greg Bonson. I'm wondering if the messaging portion of this application works, because I message people sometimes and I never get responses, and I wonder if I'm doing it right. Did you get that by chance? You
No, I
recall?
haven't watched that. And it's on YouTube.
Yeah, it's on YouTube. It's I messaged it a while back in our conversation about metaphysics and all that. But okay, well, I'll try again. And also, there's this essay from Cornelius Van Til called "Why I Believe in God." But coming in at the end of the conversation, I'm a truck driver, you see, and sometimes
Can you give
my
me that
my
name again? I want to look it
sure,
up. Sorry.
sure, no problem. It's a debate with R.C. Sproul. That's Sproul, and Greg Bonson, Greg. Of course, Bonson is spelled Bahnsen. Bonson, Nsan maybe. The two debated about methodology on how to apologize for the Christian faith. So I was kind of like you were talking about Jordan Peterson's God. My first impression of Jordan Peterson when I was listening to him for a while was this impression, because as you know, Nivek, I always contextualize my thinking about in the world, you could say, under the era of neoliberalism, and
Okay.
and I saw him and I was like, man, this guy's in neoliberalism, putting out information, putting out and stressing that idea that you got to pick yourself up by the bootstraps and be a
Okay.
responsible human being. So
Yeah.
that was my first impression. But then, as you talk about Jordan Peterson and his God, and hearing the conversation a little bit about the Old Testament, and what you've said many times in conversations in the past about being biased, right?
Yeah, I think human beings have natural instincts where they look for they seek answers to things, and they seek biases to what they more relate to in wanting confirmation to, and there could be those two sides can be conflicted.
Yeah, and I think that biblically, theologically speaking in the context of the defense of the Christian faith, right? There's different ways, and this is why I thought, to me, the debate between Bonson and Sproul to me was fascinating, because there in that debate you see two different approaches on how to defend your faith. And in R.C. Sproul's side, he takes what's called the natural theology, what is Roman Catholicism, Thomas Aquinas's Summa Theologica. This is how you defend the Christian
Wow.
faith. And then on the other side, you have Bonson, which says, no, it's got to be different. So it goes right to what you talk about when you talk about biases. And at base, if I could just come to, I guess,
What?
an overall broad statement, right?
Okay, so they're defending because their identities in Christianity.
They're what? They're
They're defending it because their identities in Christianity is where you're coming from.
right. There are differences. There are differences on how to defend the Christian faith. I guess that's where I'm coming from. There are differences, and that difference goes right to what your point when you say bias, right? When you talk about bias, you know, and I'm telling you, it's fascinating, the debate. I think you'll find it really fascinating, and the reason why is because when you talk about bias, right? Bonson's position is this: is that if you're going to talk about theology, you're going to talk about anything at all, you're coming at it from a bias. You're coming at it from a position of that says there's nothing but probabilities, and there's nothing but what my mind can conceive and perceive as being real, right? That's you could say is the that is you could say is R.C. Sproul natural theology. And what Thomas Aquinas is talking about, right? And what you do is you look at the world and you say, "Hey, look, I'm a smart person. I can see what's going on, and I understand there must be something higher than all this." And then you put God on top of that, the God of the Bible, right? Jordan Peterson's God, right on top of the Bible. Whereas what Bonson is saying is that you can't do it that way, because when you do it that way, you leave that person, and that person that doesn't believe in the Christian faith, and out an excuse, you could say, for saying, no, I reject your understanding of reality. What you should do instead, what Bonson said, is make it clear from the get-go, and this is meant with all respect and charity, Nivek, okay? This is why it's so this is why they say, there's a reason why they say the preaching of the gospel is an offense to the natural man. It's an offense because it goes right to the heart of the way views the world. So what Bonson is basically saying is this: is that when you talk about what is real and what isn't real, what you understand, and you're talking about it in a position that where you can't say anything about anything, that you have no
Yeah, it's
basis, no
absolute.
foundation, right? So that's the approach. When we talk about the Old Testament and New Testament, right? uh so you see the book of Romans and the because what we talk about, when we have these discussions, right, it's about who's right and who's wrong, right? What makes you right when you say things like, well, believing in Jesus Christ or believing the Christian faith is like believing in unicorns, right? Well, the question then is, what makes you right? And the book of Romans, the whole in the Bible, that is the exposition of that idea. That is the answer to that question: what makes you right? You know, and it
I
is
wasn't really
count.
coming from a viewpoint of just saying like a person that believes crazy things in unicorns. I was kind of like coming from a perspective of things being relative, and where you can go against this religious um, um, belief that passed on meaning that could be in a potential beneficial way in society, in upholding societal norms, right? Because it's just a story that is saying, okay, this is how you live your life, and that's what people got by on um, over time, and it could be relative in where, you know what I mean, things change over
Right.
time, and sometimes like
I
the
get you.
bias part where I'm coming from is a lot of times people lean towards what they is more relatable in a bias and what they understand, and things that are new, that are unfamiliar, especially when there's hard when you're trying to navigate the environment, you're trying to take in new things. You you could you could have a potential of leaning towards a natural human trait of seeking answers to questions, right? Or you
Yep.
can lean in the other direction of leaning towards the comfort of your bias.
Yep. And when you speak of that, as far as the changing cultures, changing life over time, and if I understand you correctly, not to be pejorative, I guess, or not to say these things in a mean and ugly, uncharitable way. When you talk about, well, you believe in unicorns. No, no, I know what you're saying. In other words, there's no foundation. There's no real, no realness in how you believe, right? And I think that at the end of the day, what you say, Nivik, is a lot really. What you talk about when I hear you talk is really almost confirms, my idea, and my idea and my understanding of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The Christian God, in the sense that you talk about, you have these biases, and you talk about how it is that people change their minds and look at their world as the world is changing, to confirm their purpose, to confirm their sort of life, and their sort of way of thinking and
That's what
navigating
God's
through
really
life.
about.
Right, and I agree with that. I agree with that.
And
And
it's kind of like a metaphor for reality of you trying to get meaning, right?
right, right,
And this thing,
I
the
agree with you.
unknown, that you're coming across, that you might
Hmm.
have a fear of, you have to get an understanding of that unknown, which is reality, the constant changes that come with reality, in order to adapt, to survive, right? Or you suffer its wrath, right? So
Yeah,
that wrath that you're trying to get an understanding of represents God, that you get meaning from. Is how I see. I see it's like
yeah.
it's an understanding of yourself, what you have to do to rise up to the occasion and overcome it and identify it for what it
Hmm.
is in order to survive. But that's a fear, and there's a fear in failing too. By the way, if you go
Yeah,
and do that, you might confirm that you're fucking ignorant. You might confirm that you're idiot, right? And that's a fear too. You might not want that. You might not want that. You might not want none of that. You might say, you know what? I feel more comfortable in me believing in what I want to believe and my confirmation bias, and people telling me that the unicorn that I believe in is the truth. And
Mm-hmm.
you are smart. Everybody else is a damn idiot. And those people who are telling you otherwise in what you believe, ignore them. But they're not really helping you. You should approach that fear, that unknown. You know what I mean? And identify things for what they are, and gaining understanding, and therefore have more of an idea how to approach a problem and overcome that matter, and and and
Mm-hmm.
uh, and get the validation that way. Get the validation of yourself that way. Then you're gonna go like, you know what? I'm a knowledgeable person. I'm intelligent. I'm competent. I'm not. I'm not. I'm yeah, you're not. I'm not ignorant, and I could rise up to a matter and overcome it, and feeling better about myself as a result. I can feel better about myself that way, instead of being told what I want to hear the other way, in leaning to my confirmation bias. And that's not always an easy thing, because sometimes people are told what they just want to hear. You know what I mean? And they
That's
don't want
true.
to. They don't want
That's
to.
true.
They don't want to venture out into the unknown, and probably fail, and probably suffer repercussions, right? Because they can't overcome the challenges,
Yeah.
and they
I
they're,
think
they're
that.
bruised and they're damaged. You know what I mean? And it's like,
Yeah.
hell no, I don't want any of that.
Yeah. You raised some really good points because a lot of times
Mm.
Christians are accused of being lazy and being, like, oh well, God, this is God's will, and it's like they use it as an excuse to bypass and try to get
I
around
see
that
that sometimes when I
idea of
interact with people. I,
responsibility.
I see that in real time when I talk to people, their challenges, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh my god, what are we going to do? And it's kind of like, well, I think, like, if you approach it this way, and you can see the person you're with is struggling, they know I have not a clue, and it's kind of, then they say to you, I have an idea. It's like, what's that? Let God handle it all. It's like, oh man,
Oh man, you roll your eyes. What was that joke I heard a little while back?
we're in trouble now.
Yeah, what was that joke I heard a while back? It was about God. He says, "Hey, yeah, uh, I believe in God and I trust in God and everything, and there's this one guy out there, in the middle of the ocean, and he was praying to God that God would save him, and then here comes a boat, and the boat comes right by him, and the guys in the boat says, 'Come on in, man, come on, hop in, I'll save you,' and it's no, 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 it's all right, God's gonna save me." God's gonna save me, and then another guy comes in with the airplane, come on in, man. I'll save you. I'll help you out. No, 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 no. I'm
Mm-hmm.
waiting for God. He'll save me. He'll save me. And that's the same thing, right? You just like you're kind of like making excuses, and so getting to
Yeah, you're
Jordan
just going off
Peterson's
of
God.
belief alone. But that's
Right,
that's kind of
right.
like that's a different type of belief. Like, there's a belief in where you're rationalizing, and you think, okay, you use a scientific method, and you're thinking like, okay, this might fly.
Yeah,
And there's a total different type of belief where, you're just, the voices in
yeah,
your head are telling you this and telling you that
yeah,
type of belief. It doesn't align with reality. You know what I mean? You take that,
yeah,
it's more coming from you, the subject. You know what I mean?
yeah.
In the subject has to equate with the object of reality, is how I see it. And if it doesn't, and if there's no equation there, you know what I mean? That means you're off in your reasoning. It has to be aligned
Uh,
with reality and what you
the
think, your subjective
the
views.
the the I can't. I was looking for it the other day, and I've had it. Man, I know I got it somewhere on my computer, and that is Van Til's five-part series on modern theology, and he touches on reality, on the ontological, argument for the existence of God and all that. And it's just really the thing about that series is that it's really hard to hear because it was recorded a long time ago, and the audio is really hard. You got to listen to it twice to really get to it, but when you talk about realities, right? And this is what I think the psychedelics and DMT is fascinating as well to me, because somehow, They made the point that, or they made the argument that the brain is more of a filter, filtering out reality. And what Van Til talks about when he talks about the people who live on this earth and try to figure out what's going on, what's real and what isn't real, is he makes this point that says that you really can't say what's real unless you take for granted first the God of Christianity.
What does that mean?
Because um, well, it's like saying, and this is what's kind of tough. I'm basically saying that when people that are not Christians talk about what reality,
Hmm.
right?
You're
The
saying
the
they're religious,
Christian,
kind of, in their own ways. Where you're coming from?
if, everybody's religious, right?
I,
Everybody,
I, I get, I
right?
get, I get what you're saying. So it's kind of like everything is a belief, regardless, right? And everything has a bias factor as well. So
Right,
when you
and
come to a conclusion, it's a belief, is kind of like what you're saying in your reasoning.
yeah, that's right. The reasoning, it comes from a belief. And R.C. Sproul, in one of his first series, when I first started to understand apologetics, and because this all, for me, Nivek, all started like 10 years ago when my Roman Catholic brother in
Can
law
I respond to that
sat me.
belief? There's a difference of belief that is based off of subjective bias in your identity being in something that is mythological, and your belief is based on a scientific process of of taking in information, and you form a hypothesis and outcome and seeing. It's, you know what I mean. By the way, it's not absolute either. Science isn't absolute. It's open to change. If if you come up with a different answer,
Right.
it's about the method of finding the answer, in being more liberal and flexible in not holding an absolute stance on things.
When you talk about believing, and when you talk about how a person perceives the world, and this is a Christian, this is a difference. This is an argument between Roman Catholicism and Protestant.
Where are you coming from? Are you religious person? Are you kind of like a spiritual? Um,
Okay, so let me answer that question. Okay, um, uh, when I was over 10 years ago, when I was having this argument between my brother-in-law, who was a Roman Catholic, and I said, no, I just don't. I'm not quite there yet. I just don't subscribe the way how you understand things. I was in the Church of Christ. I was in what was called a congregational church, and there's three types, right? And I had to answer him because he was pressing me, right? He was trying to proselytize me, and I felt it was really important to answer him. I couldn't, so I went on this long journey. At the end of the journey, I ended up in what is called Reformed theology, which is John Calvin and the 5 points of Calvinism. So when you ask the question, am I religious? I am a self-confessed Christian who has studied the methods of defending the Christian faith, because there are different ways to do it, right? And the end of, when you talk about the bias, when you talk about reality, from my studies in theology and defending the Christian faith, I've come to understand and be more in line with what Van Til and his philosophy was talking about. This is how you defend the Christian faith against people who believe or people who don't believe. And what it is basically is, it says that, and getting back to the argument between Roman Catholicism and
is
the
your
Protestant.
defending of the Christian faith more to do with the identity of others, or does it have more to do with God Himself? Because
Well, it has to do
it
with
could be potentially about you defending yourself, right? Or a person
well,
defending
it has to
themselves.
do with trying to finish my point, Nivek. It has to do with when I say I believe in God, the God of the Bible, and I believe, and this is the way I believe, and I've come from the Reformed faith. Well, first of all, the first thing you think of, first of all, is wait a minute. Hang on, man. Wait a minute. You got the Church of Christ, you got the Baptists, you got the Catholics, you got Greek Orthodox, you got all these different. So, what do you mean? I mean, Christianity. You guys, you're all freaking all over the place. So, what are you talking about? So, uh, so the Reformed faith, or this way of thinking, is a way of defending the Christian faith, right? And so to answer your question, the idea comes about. The idea comes about between the argument between the believer and the non-believer. And Van Til puts it like this: he says, if you're a non-believer, you're a non-believer because you have not been regenerated. You have not been. The Holy Spirit hasn't come into you, and you don't. You in order for you to see life and reality for what it really truly is, you cannot see it unless the Holy Spirit works in your soul and your heart, and it turns your heart into a heart of stone, into a heart of life.
Maybe I'm a
Now that's
believer,
a
but I interpret God differently than how that person interprets God.
That's right. That's right. That was my previous point, right? Well, wait a minute. You guys are all over the place. And that gets back to, because a lot of people will say, wait a minute, you guys, you don't know what the hell you believe. You're all over the damn place. So don't tell me about God. I don't want to hear it. You know what I mean? And I understand that, right? And this is why, for me, the fascination between R.C. Sproul and Bonson was so interesting, because when what Bonson says is this: if I grant you, if I grant, this is all really to the point, if I grant you that you have the ability to penetrate reality, and I grant you that, and then we start from that point, you and I start to talk about God, then I've lost my argument. I've lost my push, or my defense of the Christian faith. Because what I've done is I've put myself in your shoes, that you first look at reality, you figure it out within yourself. You have within yourself the ability to penetrate what is real and what isn't real. What Bonson says, and this is what I believe, is the best way to defend the Christian faith is to say, first of all, when you talk about chickens and air and balloons, you have no basis to say anything about anything, because you and I are on two different worlds. You're in this position, and I'm in a totally different position. Now, that's a bold thing to say. This is why Van Til in his day was so controversial, because
Uh-huh.
that's what he was saying, right? That's his point.
Or you can be
And
in the middle like JP.
well, to be in the middle is to actually already be, you know, and this is what was it, the middle? Gosh, what you just said, Nivek, in the Summa Theologica, and Thomas Aquinas's later theologians after Thomas Aquinas, working out, because Roman Catholicism sees this problem. They understand what Protestants, the Reformed theologians were saying when they objected to, no, you cannot go to God that way. And what they came up with was that word right there, what you said, middle knowledge. That's the name of it, middle knowledge. There's this middle knowledge between God and man, right? And that was their out. That was their trying to explain away, trying to defend their way of defending the Christian faith, which unfortunately R.C. Sproul is so adamant about. This is the way you do it, right? But then when you do that, I've already lost my what do you call, my argument for the existence of God, because I put you in the same place as I'm telling people, when we're Christians, we tell people right off the bat, no, 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 no. You have no basis for your understanding the world. And that's a hell of a thing to say, right? I mean, because what people say in response is, okay, then what you're telling me that I have no, okay, so what's your basis? And we simply start with, we give the
You're
apologetic
saying
message.
one can't understand the other because they're in two different worlds, kind of thing.
That's right. That's right. And and you can't unless you cannot understand reality unless you first take for granted the God of Christianity. And that is a regenerative, that is a spiritual thing. You see, the thing with Roman Catholicism,
So
Rome
how do you
says
take
this.
in God then? Eh.
Rome says this about that. Rome says, look, because it's about being right. At the end of the day, it's about when you speak and you do what you do, whatever it is that you do, at the end of the day, are you right? When you argue for or against, or when you eat and when you love, when you hate, are you right? That's what this is really all about, right?
Well, what's right?
Whether or
Right
not
is
you're right,
relative.
right? Right. Well, even then, are you right when you say right is relative? Are you right? Right. That's what I'm talking about. When you eat, when you sleep, when you talk, when you hate, when you love, it's about everything. It's about everything you do. Are you right? Even that statement. Are you right in saying that? So the Rome would say the doctrine of justification, or the book of Romans talks about justifying, right? And they talk about how it is that justification, being right, comes about going through the church, going through the orders, doing all these things, and crucifying Jesus Christ every Sunday, drinking his blood and all that, right? But what the Protestants, or the Reformed faith, says that no, they actually look at what Roman Catholicism does every Sunday as a blasphemy. I mean, they go that far. They go that far because what Rome is basically doing, and you'll read it, so that the requirements of men, we sacrifice God, Jesus Christ, every Sunday when we do the Eucharist. And what the Protestants were saying is that no, 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 that happened one time in history, one time, and that was the only time, the last time. Everything else is just a remembrance. So the justification comes about when the Holy Spirit comes into the heart and he regenerates the man, so that now, after he believes, right? Because you don't believe, you're dead. You have you have no spirituality. You don't understand anything. But once Jesus Christ comes into the heart, he regenerates the person. He justifies that person at that moment. Now, some people could say, "I know when it happened," and other people say, "I have no clue." All of a sudden, not now I know, right? And that justification is a one-time act. After that comes sanctification, and that sanctification is this understanding of the scripture and the word and all that stuff, and being more like Christ and whatnot, so on and so forth, right? But that's the big difference. Rome says, well, it's, the Protestants say it's by faith alone. Rome says, no, no, you have to have works with it, so on and so forth, right? But the point, I guess the point that I'm getting at is that the way to argue, the way to defend the faith, cannot be, if we're true, like Van Til would say. And you get this out of Corinthians. In Corinthians, it has this passage that says something like, when Paul went into the Oligopolis and all the Greeks were standing around, and says, hey, you know where's the wise? Where's the disputer of this age? Hath not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, uh, the world through its wisdom, through the foolishness of preaching, saved those who believe. Right? So he was basically telling the Greeks, so you're so smart in your way. Well, I'm sitting here telling you the God of the Bible, this is where it's at. And some people thought about it, other people's came, and this is about spreading seed and all that. But the point, I guess, of what I'm trying to make, Nivek, is that it's not it's like, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. I cannot put myself in the natural
Is there
theology.
anything
Can't.
wrong in trying to explain what's not easy to explain?
Is there nothing wrong? Oh,
Is
no,
there?
no. God, that's the preaching of the gospel is reasoning,
Uh
right?
huh.
That I could say like right.
I mean like, or 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 person giving their objective view that's not religious as well is
That's
reasoning.
just it. Nivek, you just said it right there. The objective view that's not religious. The reformers would argue this way. Van Til argues this way. Okay, and that is that your objective view is
Religious?
fighting God. Fighting God. You're not friends with God. You have very good reason not to believe. You have very good reason to give 13 arguments as to why he's not real, why you will not accept him. And the reason for this is because you are born in enmity against him. You're born pissed off, like you won't want to hear nothing about him. And that's the case for every
No, I
single
want to
human being
know
that ever
everything
was
about
born.
him because I think understanding God is understanding man. So that's not true. And
Well,
I
I mean,
I wouldn't be having a conversation if I wasn't curious about understanding man, and that's how I see it. I don't really see it as a literal
Yeah.
God like others see it.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so another person's interpretation of God is different from mine, and I could potentially even see that what they're doing is a good thing through my interpretation, because it could be about upholding a certain cultural norm that could be potentially good in society. But my problem with that is that things don't stay forever, they change over time, and where that absolute view that you have could be a problem
yeah.
potentially. And
I think I think I see what you're saying. I think that relates to what happened when Paul was
and
preaching the
let me
Greeks.
speak more towards that. That's
Go
how
ahead.
come I was talking about, like, with man, there's a natural, there's two natural sides to humans, in where they'll have biases to what they want to believe, and to lean to things that are just simply more relatable, regardless of whatever fact or reason you put, or because there's a lack of fact and reasoning. So it's kind of like, you know what, this unknown, I'm not really sure of it. I'm more leaning to just having things stay this way, instead of seeking answers to things that I don't understand. That's a natural human trait. Human beings, they naturally seek answers to things they don't understand in curiosity. Or maybe they might push back against that in being intolerant against the unknown, because it could be a potential threat, and why have it around? And it's kind of like there could be a conflict there. And uh, you could say, like, that's not come out saying, like, you well that what is new before you, that is a new problem that you approach. It might be a good, you could get a reward by trying to understand it, identify it, again, identify it for what it is. You could where you can relate to it. You know what I mean? And if you could get an understanding of something, it could be potential benefit to you, because now it could be utilized in a way that could be enriching, and you could get validation within yourself, because sometimes something that is new to a person, a fear of not overcoming it, can be there as well, and where you're ignorant and you're dumb, and the fear, it's not just a fear of the failure, it's a fear of the unknown. It's not just a fear of the failure of the unknown that could be a potential threat to you. It could be a fear of the ego too, and where you just you're just not able to overcome a matter. And sometimes people are like that. They're not going to go out and try to take on a challenge because they don't want to fail.
Yeah. I think
And
what you
they'll lean to is
go ahead.
what they're more comfortable with.
I think what you just explained in theological terms, or at least in the Reformed faith and the doctrines of grace, would be the T, which is total depravity. I think what you just explained is a good example, maybe, of a person who, like you said, will do things, for his own sanity, you can say, right? And that goes to the total depravity of man, in the sense that he's not as bad as he could actually be, but there's something wrong with man, and he will do whatever it takes to preserve himself, you know
Yeah, yeah,
what
yeah. And I'm just
right.
addressing the psychology of man.
Yeah, yeah, and in theology, it's the doctrine of total depravity, and that gets back to what Jordan Peterson I identified right away with Jordan Peterson when he talks about pick yourself up to the bootstraps. He was identified, and this is what I think the neoliberals are very good at. They have highlighted and what do you emphasize very much the doctrine of total depravity, and that is that. It's all about you. It's all about the way you view the world, the way you're responsible, and there's something wrong with you, and you got to fix it. And the only way you can fix it is you got to pick yourself up by the bootstraps, and you got to do the responsible thing. That's Jordan Peterson's God, right? And that emphasizes a T, but it totally forgets about the ULIP, right? It doesn't talk about that at all. And when I saw that
What
in Jordan
about
Peterson,
himself?
Actually, to be quite honest with you, Nivek, I recognized that in him, and I saw that, and I said, "Well, I'm not going to listen to this guy." I mean, I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier about, or somebody, the previous caller talked about the Old Testament and something about Jordan Peterson talking about the Old Testament. And the only thing I can say about that is if Jordan Peterson is stressing in any way the Old Testament, then that guy's way off, way off. Because what do we say as Christians? The Old Testament is the New Testament concealed, and the New Testament is the Old Testament revealed. So it's all one big story. So anyone that emphasizes, because they have problems, well, how can God, the problem of evil and all that, right? So yeah, for me, Peterson is a fraud of the first class. And he's just pushing the neoliberal idea, because what is neoliberalism? It says you have got to pick yourself up by the bootstraps and you be responsible. Number two, we're going to privatize what was once public. Number three, the market rules. So for me, he was just, some rich person sat him down and says, "Hey man, we're gonna make you famous, and this is what you need to go out there and push, and we're gonna get together. The think tanks are gonna get together. You get the money, and you're gonna get the exposure, and just go out there and say you got to be responsible. You got to be responsible." So to me, he's a big fraud. Big fraud. In big bold letters. So he's full of shit. You know. That's just my opinion. But then I look at everything under the context of our present, uh, our present policy, our present neoliberal uh, era. You know. And you know what, Nivek, I actually use Christian apologetics, the apologetic method, in my defense, or my argument for getting our country back from the neoliberals. And I'm basically saying to the people, the truth and the strategy that I have formulated, which just comes on at 7:30. I'm gonna plug in real quick. All right, my show, it's called The Divorce and the power behind it. The divorce, as in we're going to divorce ourselves from neoliberals, oligarchs, and corporations that have captured our government. And I've got a strategy, and I want to expound on that. But this strategy that I'm putting forth to get our government back
Is that on YouTube?
from the neoliberals is in effect an example of the Christian apologetics that Van Til speaks of. And what I'm basically saying to people is this: is that damn well in your heart we are no longer a government of, by, and for the people. The question for you now, that is what, finding the power to get it back. And I'm going to put people in a position where it's going to be like the believer and the non-believer. The believer and the non-believer, and the antithesis between the two. Either you're going to believe or you're not in Christianity. Either you're a believer. There's two kinds of people in the world: the Christians and the non-Christians. There's two kinds of people in America: those who believe in embedded liberalism, what is a decent society, and the indecency of neoliberalism. You have your
I think
choice.
everybody has a bit of that religious mindset in them, regardless of Christianity not existing. A person, I
Agreed.
think, would
Agreed.
always
Yeah.
come up with some type of dogmatic belief that I believe goes to their biases.
Yep. I agree with
and
that.
and
Can't argue that.
it's about you wanting to, and believe what you want, and looking for validation for that. And as
Yep.
Akama was mentioning, the factors that would lead people to be that way, and where you're biased towards what's more relatable to you, and that would
Yep.
be natural, and where